Chapter 1483. Ghost's expression became strange. Is this a ceremony for the merfolk to become sworn brothers? This merfolk has taken a fancy to me and wants to become sworn brothers with me? It didn't make sense. She had been here for a few days recently, but this merfolk didn't treat her particularly well. After thinking for a while, Ghost asked, "What is her status here?" She didn't have much contact with the merfolk, but it wasn't difficult to see that Bai Lu's status here wasn't low. Lu Yi pondered for a moment and said, "Bai Lu is the princess of this merfolk clan." Ghost was stunned. She obviously didn't expect Bai Lu's status to be so noble. On second thought, she was a princess, and she drank the golden thing, so there shouldn't be any problem. Moreover, looking at Wu Zun's posture, if she didn't drink it, she most likely wouldn't be able to escape. If she was forced to drink it, then the scene wouldn't be pretty. After making up her mind, Ghost looked at Lu Yi. "Remember what you said. If I drink this, you will take me away. If you dare to tease me, I will fight you to the death." With that said, she took the shell from Lu Yi's hand and drank it all. She was smart. When she drank the golden light, she had already wrapped it with her spiritual power. Once she got out of here, she would spit it out. This little trick wasn't difficult for her. But what surprised her was that although she had used her spiritual power to envelop it, the moment the golden light entered her abdomen, the binding of her spiritual power lost its effect. Then, Ghost felt a warm current rising from her abdomen. That warm current seemed to have turned into a living thing, like an invisible little snake that quickly slithered in her body. Her face changed, and she hurriedly immersed herself in investigating. At the same time, she urged her spiritual power to suppress it, but it was completely useless. In just 2 short breaths, the invisible snake swam to her arm. A slight tingling pain came, and then there was no more abnormality. She hurriedly lowered her head and looked at the place where the tingling pain came from, only to see that there was an additional spiral mark in that position. "What is this?" She looked up and glared at Lu Yi. Lu Yi was surprised. The mark looked the same as the one he had left behind with the blue sea conch. The only difference was that the mark on the ghost's arm was gold, while the one he had left behind with the blue sea conch was cyan. He looked at Bai Lu in confusion, only to see Bai Lu smile and flip her arm over. On the inside of her arm, there was also a golden spiral mark. Lu Yi blurted out, "You can think of this mark as a symbol of you sisters becoming sworn sisters." Ghost obviously didn't believe his nonsense. She just stared at Bai Lu, wanting her to give an explanation. Bai Lu flipped her palm, and a short spear-like weapon appeared in her hand. Before Lu Yi could react, she suddenly turned the spearhead and stabbed herself in the abdomen. Although this kind of weapon forged by the merfolk clan did not have any restrictions, it was extremely sharp. Even if Bai Lu had the strength of a late-stage constellation realm cultivator and her body was not ordinary, this spear still directly pierced through her lower abdomen without using spiritual power to protect her body. Blood splashed out, but she didn't even frown. Only a trace of pain flashed through her eyes. Lu Yi was shocked, completely unaware of what she was doing. But something even more surprising happened. As Bai Lu stabbed with the spear, she didn't cry out, but Ghost next to her screamed. She reached out to cover her abdomen, as if she had suffered a heavy blow, and her body instinctively retreated. Lu Yi could clearly see that the place she was covering was exactly the same as the place where Bai Lu had stabbed her. Blood was flowing out from between her fingers. Bai Lu pulled out the short spear and slashed her arm with lightning speed. A bloody wound immediately appeared on her fair arm. At the same time, Ghost, who clearly didn't suffer any attack, had the exact same injury on the same part of her body. Bai Lu said, "Tell her that no matter how far apart we are from each other in the future, we will be closely connected. She will suffer the same injuries that I suffer. If I die, she won't be able to live either." Lu Yi looked at Bai Lu with a grave expression. There's no need for that. If he had known that Bai Lu was going to use such a method, he wouldn't have agreed. But before Bai Lu used this method, she didn't explain it to him at all. Lu Yi thought that the merfolk clan had some special secret technique. But now it seemed that it wasn't the merfolk clan's secret technique, but the effect of the 2 golden conches. The two golden conches were wonderful things brought out by a pair of twins on the Merfolk clan's side from the Tian Luo Palace Hall. The Merfolk clan had obviously seen through their effects long ago, but they had never had a chance to use them. Because this kind of thing, which was closely connected to each other's lives, didn't have much use in itself. This time, after seeing Lu Ye's dilemma, Bai Lu decisively used it. Before using it, she deliberately didn't explain the situation to Lu Yi because she knew that once she did, Lu Yi would definitely not agree. It was better to act first and report later. Feeling Lu Ye's heavy mood, Bai Lu smiled slightly. "It's okay, as long as it can help you." "Can it be removed?" Lu Yi asked. If it couldn't be removed, then Bai Lu's life would really be tied to ghosts in the future. Bai Lu wouldn't encounter too much danger in the Merfolk clan's territory, but Ghost was wandering outside and encountered a lot of danger. When the time came, it would inevitably implicate Bai Lu. Maybe one day Bai Lu would suffer an unexpected disaster. Yes, as long as both sides agree, the mark can be removed. But before she is obedient, I think it's best not to remove it. When the two were talking, Ghost also faintly realized the mystery of the mark, but she wasn't sure. She could only ask, "Puwuzuan, what the hell is going on?" Lu Yi looked at her and told her what Bai Lu had just said. Ghost was completely stunned. She had thought that he was going to become sworn brothers with her. Who would have thought that her life would be tied to his? He was right. This time, they were really going to live and die together. She was annoyed for a moment. "Wuzuan, is this how you treat me? You're too despicable. So you'd better be obedient." Ghost was so angry that her nose was crooked. She wanted to curse, but on second thought, she thought of something and suddenly laughed. She's the Merfolk clan's princess. Her status is noble. I don't believe that she will die together with me just to kill me. I, Ghost, have a worthless life. Now that someone is willing to live and die with me, it's still a gain for me. And since she can control my life and death, it seems like I can control her life and death as well. With that said, she raised her hand and summoned a dagger. Lu Yi found it familiar. It was the dagger she had pulled out from the skeleton general's eye socket. Ghost's eyes were filled with eagerness as she threatened Lu Yi, "Hurry up and take me out, or I won't be polite." Lu Yi raised his hand and pressed down on the hilt of the mountain pan saber. Ghost was also decisive. The dagger directly slashed across her arm, immediately leaving a wound. As expected, a similar wound appeared on Bai Lu's arm. Blood flowed freely. Lu Yi frowned. The effects of the two golden conches were too strange. He couldn't feel any mysterious energy fluctuations at all. But whether it was Bai Lu or Ghost, as long as one of them was injured, the other would definitely suffer the same injury. Bai Lu clearly saw through Ghost's plan. She lowered her head and looked at the wound on her arm. She didn't move at all. She only raised her head and smiled at Ghost. This smile made Ghost feel inexplicably creeped out. Then, she saw Bai Lu slowly raise the short spear and aim the tip of the spear at her own chest. "What are you doing?" Ghost panicked. Bai Lu's expression didn't change. She was still smiling. The dagger in her hand slowly pierced her chest. Blood flowed out, dyeing the shell red. The dagger was slowly but surely piercing toward the depths of her heart. This time, not only did Ghost panic, but even Lu Ye's expression changed. "Don't!" Ghost screamed and hurriedly rushed over. She grabbed the dagger in Bai Lu's hand and shook her head at her pleadingly. Although this kind of injury wasn't fatal for a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator, it would definitely greatly damage her vitality. Ghost had never expected that the mermaid princess, who looked so charming, would be so ruthless in her actions. Bai Lu's hand stopped moving. She raised a finger and tapped it on Ghost's forehead. The ethereal song of enlightenment rang out. Then Bai Lu's divine sense surged. Lu Yi didn't know what she said to Ghost, but Ghost's expression began to soften. She nodded repeatedly, and even revealed a look of pleasant surprise. A moment later, the two women began to heal their wounds. Their injuries looked terrible, but they knew when to stop. For late-stage Constellation Realm cultivators like them, these were only superficial wounds that could be easily healed. Ghost had completely calmed down. Lu Yi could even see that she was faintly looking forward to something, but he didn't know what she was looking forward to. Curious, he asked Bai Lu, what did you say to her just now? Lui had a rough idea of Ghost's temperament. She was the kind of person who wouldn't budge even if she was led along. He just didn't know what method Bai Lu had used to appease her. I told her that the secret technique's effect isn't just to let us live and die together. If we cultivate together, the efficiency of our cultivation will also be greatly increased. You lied to her? Lui asked. Bai Lu laughed. No, it's true. Then she's profited. Although sharing life and death together was indeed a constraint, if it could greatly increase the efficiency of their cultivation, it wasn't unacceptable. Lu Yi even suspected that if he had told Ghost about this from the beginning, she might not have refused. Ghost's matter could be considered resolved. With Bai Lu here to constrain her, she probably knew what to say and what not to say after leaving this place. Lu Yi said to Bai Lu with a straight face, if you make similar decisions in the future, you'll have to discuss it with me first. Bai Lu had acted arbitrarily today, undoubtedly knowing that he wouldn't agree. Although the result was quite good, Lu Yi didn't want something similar to happen again. End of chapter. Chapter 1484. Got it? Bai Lu nodded obediently and stuck out her tongue playfully at Lu Yi. Lu Yi looked helpless. He turned to Ghost and said, hurry up and finish inscribing your ghostly tattoo. Ghost felt wronged. Why are you being so mean? Why are you being so mean to the mermaid princess? Ghost continued inscribing her ghostly tattoo while Lu Yi waited quietly. The mysterious power of the two golden conches reminded him of the life origin technique. Speaking of which, after he formed the life origin technique with Hupa, he and Hupa were in a state of life and death. The effect was very similar to Bai Lu and Ghost's state. However, there was a difference. The life origin technique simply made Hupa's life depend on his safety. In other words, if he died, Hupa would die with him. However, if Hupa died, he wouldn't suffer any harm. From this point of view, the life origin technique was more effective than the two golden conches. The other difference was that their injuries wouldn't be synchronized. Lu Yi had long thought of dispelling the life origin technique. As his cultivation increased, the enemies he encountered would become stronger and stronger. No one knew what kind of danger he would encounter in the future. If he caused Hupa to die with him, then Yi wouldn't be able to live either. However, he obtained the life origin technique from the realm of beasts. It was easy to form it, but dispelling it wasn't so easy. The life origin technique manifested on his chest. There was a complicated pattern that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. It was clearly something like a spiritual tattoo. Lu Yi felt that he should be able to use the talent tree to deduce the mysteries of this spiritual tattoo and find a way to dispel it. With that thought, he made up his mind. After he finished deducing the aura concealing spiritual tattoo, he would start deducing the life origin technique's spiritual tattoo. A moment later, Ghost finished inscribing the ghostly tattoo and returned the jade tablet to him. Lu Yi took it and inspected it. He asked casually, you didn't miss anything or intentionally miss anything, right? Ghost glared at him hatefully. Do you want me to take off my clothes for you to inspect? Lu Yi looked up at her. If you're willing, don't even think about it. Ghost huffed. I've fulfilled my promise. When are you going to take me away from here? Although she really wanted to try cultivating with Bai Lu and see how much more efficient it would be, there was no rush. There would be opportunities in the future. I'll come pick you up in a few days. Lu Yi put away the jade tablet. The door of the Azure Sea Snail had long been closed. He had to return to the unparalleled island from the Constellation Hall. He could only come back in 7 days to bring Spectre back. After instructing Bai Lu to keep an eye on Ghost, Lu Yi left the merfolk's territory. Just like the previous time, Zhang Xian borrowed a seahorse star beast and rushed toward the Constellation Hall. Lu Yi found that as long as his luck wasn't particularly bad, he wouldn't encounter any moon jade star beasts. Furthermore, the seahorses were very fast in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Even if they encountered one, they would have a chance of escaping. Lu Yi allowed the seahorse to return on its own, then pushed open the door to the Constellation Palace and returned to Matchless Island through the door that had always been open. Instead of returning to his cave, Lu Yi went to the Island of Versatility. He had lost the starboat he bought last time. He had to buy another one. Otherwise, It would be inconvenient for him to travel. Lu Yi only spent 20 to 30,000 spirit jades on the Lost Star boat, so he didn't feel the pinch. In the past, he didn't have many spirit jades on hand, so he could only buy whatever was cheap. Now that he was rich, he naturally wanted to buy something better and more expensive. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't handle a battleship alone, Lu Yi would have bought a battleship. After contacting Chao Xiang in advance, Lu Yi received a warm reception. He spent a total of 300,000 spirit jades to buy a high-quality star boat. Lu Yi drove the star boat straight to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Lu Yi was very satisfied with the star boat's various functions. As the saying goes, you get what you pay for. This star boat was several times better than his previous one, be it in terms of control or comfort. It was also faster. It wasn't that his previous star boat couldn't fly at such a fast speed. It could also fly at such a fast speed. However, if there was an unbreakable obstacle in front of him, he wouldn't be able to dodge it in time. When that happened, he would crash into it, and the boat would be destroyed and the passengers would be injured. However, the star boat was different. Even if it flew at a faster speed, if there was an unbreakable obstacle in front of him, the array would be able to warn him in time, allowing the cultivator to dodge it with ease. Moreover, if his previous star boat crashed into some small meteorites, there would be a very obvious tremor. However, the star boat didn't feel anything at all. It was undoubtedly more durable. Lu Yi wanted to go to the mermaid clan's territory to pick up Ghost. Naturally, he couldn't set off from the Matchless Island. Otherwise, when Ghost appeared in the cave on the Matchless Island, she would immediately know that Fa Wuzuan was Li Taibai. Therefore, he could only find a remote location and pick her up before making further plans. Lu Yi wouldn't set her free for the time being. As for how to settle her down, he already had a plan in mind. After 2 or 3 days, he found a desolate star and landed on it. Then, he found a secluded place and waited. While waiting, Lu Yi took out the ghost pattern jade plate that Ghost's spirit had inscribed. As he studied it, he activated the power of the talent tree and began to derive new spirit patterns based on the original aura concealing spirit pattern. A few days later, when the Azure Sea Snail could be used, Lu Yi took it out and blew it, opening the door to the Heavenly Sea Snail Palace. Because he had warned them before he left last time, Lu Yi saw Bai Lu and Ghost waiting for him as soon as he appeared. Bai Lu nodded at Lu Yi with a smile. Then, she nudged Ghost beside her. Ghost walked forward reluctantly and came to Lu Ye's side. She said, "Wuzuan, I want to stay here for a while longer." Lu Yi frowned. Previously, this girl was so desperate to leave. Why did she change her mind after not seeing her for a few days? Cultivate. It's very efficient to cultivate with Bai Lu. Besides, we don't have to worry about resources here. I think I'll be able to advance to Yu Yao after a while. Ghost said excitedly. Bai Lu had told her that if they cultivated together, their efficiency would be greatly improved. She already had some expectations, but who knew that when she really started cultivating, she would discover that the improvement was beyond her imagination. What attracted her more than the increase in cultivation efficiency was that she didn't have to worry about not having enough spirit jades here. She had seen the spirit jade vein in the merfolk's territory with her own eyes. At that time, her eyes had lit up. If Bai Lu hadn't held her back, she probably would have rushed down to fill her storage ring. For a poor person like her to come to this place was like a sex fiend entering a brothel, the kind that could be bought for free. She suddenly realized that this was a really good place. It was so good that she didn't want to leave. If Bai Lu hadn't reminded her today, she would have forgotten that Lu Yi was coming to pick her up. This trip was a blessing in disguise. She had long forgotten all the unpleasant things that had happened before. I want to cultivate here for another half a year. Come pick me up after half a year. At that time, before Ghost could finish speaking, Lu Yi raised his hand and grabbed her by the neck. Then he threw her into the door. I'm leaving first. I'll come again next time. Lu Yi waved at Bai Lu, then turned and entered the door. I'll kill you. Ghost had just steadied herself when she pounced on Lu Yi with bared fangs and brandished claws. She looked like she wanted to tear Lu Yi apart. Wuzuan was really too infuriating. She had wanted to leave before, but Fa Wuzuan wouldn't take her with him. Now that she wanted to stay, Fa Wuzuan threw her out. Ghost had never been so wronged in her life. A moment later, Ghost, who had been punched by Lu Yi after exchanging a few blows with him, hugged her head with both hands and calmed down. She was weaker than him, so there was nothing she could do. She swore to herself that when she became a Yu Yao, she would definitely teach this guy a lesson. Give me your star map. Lu Yi stretched out a hand to her. What for? Ghost looked at him warily. Cut the crap. Lu Yi's gaze turned cold. Spectre reluctantly took out her star chart, and Lu Yi did something to it before tossing it back to her. There is a matchless island on the Vientiane Sea. Go there. Although Ghost wouldn't say anything she shouldn't say with Bai Lu around, Lu Yi wasn't going to let her out of his sight for the time being. Moreover, the matchless island was really short on manpower. If Ghost went there, she would be of some help. Ha! Ghost sneered. She raised her head slightly and pointed her chin at Lu Yi. Beg me. See if I'll go if you beg me. Lu Yi said unhurriedly, I'm the only one who can take you to the mermaid territory. The sneer on Ghost's face stiffened. She was annoyed for a moment. After a moment of silence, she said, What's so special about the matchless island that you're interested in? You don't have to worry about it. Just go there. They're short on manpower now. If you accept their invitation, it won't be difficult for you to enter. Give me a deadline. You can't make me stay there forever, right? That depends on your performance. Lu Yi glanced at her indifferently and soared into the sky. Ghost gritted her teeth as she watched Lu Yi leave. She waved her fist in the direction Lu Yi left, as if she wanted to beat him to death. After a moment, she calmed down and took out her star map to check. Matchless Island? What bullshit is this? I've never heard of it. She had been in the 10,000 Elephant Sea for many years. She came here after she was promoted to a constellation mansion. She knew all the powerful and famous spiritual islands in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, and Unparalleled Island was not one of them. She was sure that this was a deserted island without any fame. It wasn't even marked on the star map. After some investigation, it was just as she thought. The location of the matchless island on the star map was relatively remote. It was only marked as a deserted island. She didn't want to go, but she had to go. She missed the cultivation environment of the mermaid tribe. Especially after her recent contact with Bai Lu, she learned about the existence of the Celestial Spiral Palace. She knew that it was a secret realm where she could gain benefits. However, she needed the Mermaid Queen's permission to enter the Celestial Spiral Palace. She had no choice but to take out her planetary boat and fly toward the Vientiane Sea. End of chapter. Chapter 1485. Following the guidance of the star chart in her hand, Ghost arrived at Peerless Island in a few days. She didn't expose herself. Instead, she hid nearby and investigated the situation. At first, she thought that this was just a nameless, deserted island that some small fry had come to occupy. Who knew that when she arrived, she would discover that something was amiss. The island was enveloped by an extremely powerful protective formation. What surprised her even more was that she wasn't the only ghost cultivator in the vicinity. She could sense that there were several ghost cultivators hiding in the dark, as if they were monitoring the situation on Peerless Island. There were even some who were brazenly observing from afar. Ghost was at a loss. Wasn't this just a deserted island? Who had nothing better to do than to set up such a large formation here? What were these people secretly spying on Peerless Island doing? Logically speaking, there were many deserted islands like this on the Myriad Manifestation Sea. They were all worthless. Normally, no one would occupy them. However, what she saw in front of her made her very confused. Now that Peerless Island was enveloped by the formation, the starry sky energy produced by reversing the seawater in the minor constellation hall was blocked. Therefore, those outside Peerless Island couldn't sense anything unusual on the island. Ghost naturally thought that Peerless Island was a deserted island. While investigating, Ghost suddenly saw a familiar figure. She finally understood why Fa Wuzuan had asked her to come here. It was because she saw Chu Shen. She roughly knew about the relationship between Chu Shen and Fa Wuzuan. Back then, when she had asked Fa Wuzuan to help her enter the exclusive scene, She had asked Chu Shen to pass on a message. Upon closer inspection, Ghost realized that Chu Shen's status here wasn't low. The people on the island were very respectful to him. Since she was already here, she could only go in and take a look. She didn't know why Fa Wuzuan had asked her to come here. However, in order to be able to go to the merfolk's territory anytime in the future, she could only endure the humiliation and compromise. Everything would have to wait until she became Yu Yao. She didn't show herself. Instead, she took out a musical note and sent a message to Chu Shen. The two of them had exchanged musical note imprints back in the minor constellation hall. Chu Shen, who was talking to someone on the island, sensed something. He took out a musical note and looked at it. His expression lit up. Then, he quietly controlled the island's formation and opened a gap. Ghost had been waiting there for a long time. In a flash, she came in. As soon as she set foot on the matchless island, Spectre's expression changed. This was because she could feel an extremely pure and rich starry sky energy coming from this place. Suddenly, he realized that the Wushuang Island was not a deserted island, but a spiritual island. But how was this possible? If it was spiritual island, it would have been occupied by a force long ago. Why would it still be here today? When she was observing from the outside just now, although she didn't see the full picture of the people on the island, she could roughly see that there weren't many people here, and their cultivations were generally not high. Many of them were in the early stage of the constellation realm, and it seemed that Chu Shen was the leader. What right did such a force have to occupy a spiritual island? Moreover, it was a spiritual island of this level. After sensing for a while, Ghost was sure that the unparalleled island could be considered a middle-grade spiritual island based on the energy density. There were many spiritual islands on the Vientiane Sea. Some were good, some were bad. The standard to judge them was the cosmic energy on the island. Those spiritual islands that had cosmic energy but couldn't satisfy the constellation realm's cultivation were the lowest grade of low-grade spiritual islands. In the entire Vientiane Sea, there were many of such spiritual islands. Most of them were occupied by the less powerful realms. Although it couldn't satisfy the constellation realm's cultivation, if one cultivated on such spiritual islands, they could save some spiritual jades and increase the efficiency of their cultivation. Therefore, there was still some value in it, although it wasn't very valuable. Even so, low-grade spiritual islands like these were fought over by countless realms. This was because no matter how many low-grade spiritual islands there were, they couldn't outnumber the realms where the cultivators came from. Cultivators came from different galaxies and different realms. All of them needed a place to settle down. Occupying a deserted island was meaningless. If one wasn't strong enough, he could only think of occupying a low-grade spiritual island. Most of the fights between spiritual islands on the Vientiane Sea happened on low-grade spiritual islands. Above the low-grade spiritual islands were middle-grade spiritual islands like the Matchless Island. The cosmic energy on such spiritual islands could satisfy the cultivation needs of the constellation realm cultivators. In other words, one could cultivate on such a spiritual island even if they didn't have any spiritual jades. If they used spiritual jades, their cultivation efficiency would be higher. The value of such spiritual islands was undoubtedly much higher than that of low-grade spiritual islands. On the Vientiane Sea, the forces that were qualified to occupy such spiritual islands were extremely powerful. Above that were the high-grade spiritual islands. The cosmic energy on these islands was so dense that it could even satisfy Yu Yao's cultivation needs. The forces that occupied these spiritual islands were undoubtedly much stronger than those that occupied middle-grade spiritual islands. Usually, they were occupied by groups of cultivators from an entire galaxy. Basically, there wouldn't be any major conflicts between these spiritual islands. This was because once a conflict broke out, it would be a war between two galaxies. When that happened, many people would be involved and it would be difficult to resolve. In history, there was once a conflict between two high-grade spiritual islands, which led to a large-scale conflict that lasted for 10 years. In that conflict, more than 10 high-grade spiritual islands and hundreds of middle-grade and low-grade spiritual islands were involved. During that 10 years, the entire Vientiane Sea was in chaos. In the end, Nicho from the Vientiane galaxy couldn't stand it anymore and stepped in to quell the conflict. This was also one of the reasons why Nicho from the outside was not allowed to stay on the Vientiane Sea for long periods of time. Without Nicho from the outside, Nicho from the local territory could still suppress some unfavorable situations. However, if every powerful galaxy had Nicho from the local territory, once a large-scale conflict broke out, Nicho from the local territory would be helpless. Above the high-grade spiritual islands, there was actually another grade, which was the highest grade of spiritual islands. This was because the cosmic energy on these spiritual islands was so dense that it could give birth to spiritual jade veins. For example, the Vientiane Island was such a top-grade spiritual island. Although Lu Yi had entered and exited the Vientiane Island many times, there was one area that he had never been to before. That was the forbidden area of the Vientiane Island, where the entrance to the spiritual jade veins was located. Yu Yao guarded that area all year round, and anyone who dared to trespass would be killed without mercy. In the entire Vientiane Sea, there weren't many top-grade spiritual islands like the Vientiane Island. There were less than 50 of them. This meant that the 50 spiritual jade veins were all occupied by the top-grade forces. Since ancient times, no one had been able to shake their position. Spiritual jade veins were extremely precious. They meant an endless supply of cultivation resources, which was what cultivators desired the most. Generally speaking, only top-grade regions could give birth to spiritual jade veins. For example, although the 9 continents had been upgraded to a large region, it would still take many years to accumulate enough resources to give birth to spiritual jade veins. Spiritual jade veins could not only produce spiritual jades, but also spiritual crystals. These were important resources for Yu Yao's cultivation. In other words, having a spiritual jade vein meant that one could nurture more powerful cultivators. The Peerless Island was far from being a top-grade spiritual island. It was at most a middle-grade spiritual island. Even so, it was enough to shock Ghost. She couldn't understand why such a spiritual island wasn't marked on the star map, and why it was occupied by Chu Shen and his people. Following Chu Shen's instructions, Ghost came to a large hall. This should be the guest hall, which was mainly used to receive guests. It was obvious that it had been built not long ago. The furnishings in the room were very new. She slowly revealed herself. Chu Shen had already walked in with a smile on his face. He cupped his fists and bowed. "Senior Sister Ghost, why are you here?" They had met before, so they weren't unfamiliar with each other. However, Chu Shen couldn't understand why Ghost would come here. They didn't have any special relationship. Ghost thought for a moment and said, "Wuzuan asked me to come." This guy was Fa Wuzuan's underling. Some things couldn't be hidden from him. Hence, Ghost could only tell him the truth. "My big brother asked you to come?" It was only then that Chu Shen reacted. Thinking about it, it was not strange. Phoenix, Great Pharaoh, and Ghost were familiar with each other. Now that Peerless Island was in dire need of manpower, especially for someone as strong as Ghost, it was natural for Phoenix, Great Pharaoh, to ask her for help. He was secretly happy. He was just worrying about where to find suitable manpower. Fa Lao actually asked Ghost to come. She came at the right time. "Since my big brother asked you to come, Senior Sister, you can stay here. If you need anything, just let me know." Chu Shen's attitude was warm. Ghost nodded and asked, "What's up with this spiritual island?" "What do you mean?" Chu Shen didn't understand. Such a spiritual island should have been occupied by someone long ago. Why? She wanted to ask why it was his turn, but it didn't seem right. Chu Shen already understood what she meant. He smiled and said, "Senior Sister, you don't know. This was originally a deserted island. I brought people and occupied it before it became lively." Ghost was enlightened. "I see." She was just wondering why no one would take a fancy to this spiritual island. It turned out that it was a reincarnated spiritual island. Chu Shen's luck was truly exceptional. She had naturally heard about the reincarnated spiritual islands. However, after so many years, there were countless spiritual islands in the Vientiane Sea. Only a few of them had been reincarnated as spiritual islands. Furthermore, they were all low-grade spiritual islands. However, Spectre quickly realized that something was amiss. If one were to truly be reborn from a deserted island, there would be a slow transformation process. This process would take at least a few years or even a decade. However, Chu Shen had previously participated in the Constellation Hall tournament in Constellation Hall. Not much time had passed since the Constellation Hall tournament ended. How long had it been? When did this island become lively? Ghost asked. Chu Shen thought for a moment and said, "It happened about a month ago. When we came here, this place was desolate. There wasn't even a bit of energy left. But after a few days, it started to change. It's like this now." More than a month. Ghost widened her eyes and looked at Chu Shen in disbelief. She almost thought that he was lying to her. End of chapter. Chapter 1486. The transformation of a deserted island was a very slow process. It was not something that could be completed in a day. A few years or more was already considered fast. In just a month, a deserted island had become a mid-tier spiritual island. Ghost could not believe it, but there was no reason for Chu Shen to lie to her about such things. Furthermore, it had not been long since the Constellation Hall ended. Even if Chu Shen had come here immediately after the Constellation Hall battle ended, it had only been 3 months. Is the energy on the island still increasing? Ghost suddenly thought of a key point. Chu Shen said, "It's increasing every day. Especially after we set up the defensive array, the increase is very obvious." Ghost was shocked. "Doesn't that mean—" She did not dare to continue, but Chu Shen nodded seriously. "This is definitely not the final state of Unparalleled Island. In the future, it might become a high-tier spiritual island or even a top-tier spiritual island." Ghost could not help but be dazed. Chu Shen left. He was now the palace master of the Unparalleled Palace and the island master of the Unparalleled Island. He had to deal with all the matters on the island personally, so he was very busy. There were quite a number of residences on the island, and he got Spectre to choose a place to settle down before he went off to get busy. Ghost walked out of the guest hall and walked around Unparalleled Island. She felt the decent energy of the stars on the island, and her gloomy mood improved a lot. Originally, she was unhappy that Fa Wuzuan had forced her to come to Unparalleled Island. If not for the chance to go to the mermaid territory in the future, she would not have cared. But now, it seemed that Fa Wuzuan's actions only brought her benefits and no harm. As long as she was on Unparalleled Island, she could cultivate without the help of spiritual jades. Due to the uniqueness of her cultivation, she needed a lot of spirit jades. The more spirit jades she consumed, the faster her strength improved. Therefore, she had always used the little bit of spirit jades she had on hand to increase her strength, causing her to appear as a pauper. Previously, Lu Yi had only given her 300,000 spiritual jades, and she had used them all. Now, she was penniless. Even her future cultivation was a problem. But if she stayed on Unparalleled Island, even without spiritual jades, she could still improve her strength. It was just that the speed would be slower. If the Peerless Island really became a top-notch spiritual island in the future, even if she became a Yu Yao, she would have a good place to cultivate. Realizing this, her original dissatisfaction and resentment towards Fa Wuzuan instantly vanished. Ghost even wanted to thank him in person. This Unparalleled Island was a treasure trove. He had to gain a foothold here. This was especially true given the current situation on Peerless Island. They were currently in dire need of talents. She, Ghost, was one of the top 200 on the Constellation Hall's rankings. It wouldn't be long before she would be promoted to the same level as Yu Yao. As long as she put in a little effort, she would definitely be put in an important position. After pondering for a moment, he went to look for the busy Chu Shen and changed the way he addressed him. "Island Master, I have a friend who is homeless. May I know if you can take him in?" Chu Shen pondered for a moment and said, "Since he's seen your sister's friend, there's naturally no problem. Just call him over." Previously, he had asked Lucky Star to recruit people on Zhaolai Island because the situation had forced him to do so. Because he wanted to build a force, he couldn't rely on just the few of them. But now that Peerless Island had become a middle-grade spirit island, he didn't need to recruit people like that anymore. He only needed to say a word, and many people would take the initiative to come over. It could be said that in the past, he was the one who spent spiritual jades to beg people to come over and help. But now, things were different. Even if others wanted to come in, he had to see if they were sincere and whether they were strong enough. Take the Constellation Hall's early-stage cultivators who were recruited from Zhaolai Island as an example. Originally, they didn't have much of a sense of identity with Peerless Island. They were just working for their monthly salary. But now, everyone was full of energy and enthusiasm. These people went to Zhaolai Island because they were poor people. They didn't have much spiritual jades on hand and were willing to be recruited just for the monthly salary. Now that Peerless Island was a middle-grade spirit island, the energy on the island was enough to satisfy their cultivation needs. Where else could they find such a good deal? After getting Chu Shen's permission, Ghost sent a message out. Her eyes curved as she smiled and said to Chu Shen, "Don't worry, this friend of mine is not ordinary. Island Master, you've met him before." Chu Shen thought for a moment and immediately realized who it was. If it was that person, then he was really not ordinary. His ranking on the Constellation Hall's ranking was even higher than Ghost's. Now he had 2 more generals under his command. As expected, the pharaoh was the one who loved his people. If not for the pharaoh, why would these 2 strong cultivators come to him to seek refuge? In an instant, Chu Shen felt that Peerless Island's future was promising. Since she had decided to gain a foothold on Peerless Island, Ghost naturally had to investigate this spirit island thoroughly. The spirit island wasn't small, but under the investigation of the late Constellation Hall's experts, she finished investigating very quickly. At this moment, Ghost was floating in midair in front of a rock wall at the side of the island. She looked at a dark cave in front of her and frowned. She felt that someone had set up a restriction inside, but she didn't know who was hiding here. Her figure flashed and she silently landed in the cave. After looking around carefully, she started trying to break the restriction in front of her. As an outstanding ghost cultivator, this kind of thing wasn't difficult for her. As she was trying to break the restriction, Ghost suddenly felt the restriction open on its own. Then she looked up and saw a figure sitting cross-legged in the depths of the cave, staring at her expressionlessly. The light was a little dim, so Ghost couldn't see the person's face clearly. However, the person's somewhat familiar gaze made her hair stand on end. She quickly took a step back and put on her guard. "Fa Wuzuan. What are you shouting for?" Lu Yi asked. Lu Yi had already sensed this person when he came. If Ghost was going to stay on Peerless Island in the future, they would have to meet each other. Therefore, Lu Yi had no intention of hiding and simply opened the restriction of the cave. Ghost felt that the voice wasn't right. After looking carefully, she realized that the person in front of her looked familiar and wasn't Fa Wuzuan. She was surprised. "Li Taibai? Why are you here?" Lu Yi said casually, "Why can't I be here?" Ghost obviously misunderstood. She understood and said, "So you're from Peerless Palace too?" She walked in slowly and looked around. Then, she sat cross-legged not far in front of Lu Yi and asked curiously, "Since you're from Peerless Palace, why are you staying in such a simple place? It's quieter here. You, on the other hand, why are you here?" Ghost said, "I'll be wherever I want to be. Why do you care?" She wouldn't say that she was forced here by Fa Wuzuan, although the result was not bad. She changed the topic. "You're at the later stage of Constellation Realm? Your cultivation progress is quite fast. It's a pity. If you were at the later stage of Constellation Realm before the Constellation Palace battle, you might be able to fight for a place in the rankings." Lu Yi said indifferently, "There are countless strong people on the rankings. I'm afraid I can't compete with them with my strength." Ghost smiled. "At least you know your place. There were many people at the later stage of Constellation Realm, but how many of them left their names on the rankings? Ordinary people at the later stage of Constellation Realm were indeed not qualified to fight for a place in the rankings." While laughing, Ghost's brows furrowed as she looked Lu Yi up and down, her face filled with bewilderment. "What's wrong?" Lu Yi looked at her. Ghost was silent for a moment before she said in a low voice, "Looking at you, you look like someone else I know." Not only was her figure similar, her gaze was similar, even her temperament was similar. She suddenly remembered that Li Taibai was an armament cultivator, and so was Fa Wuzuan. Ghost suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. Oh, who's that? Ghost stared at Lu Ye's eyes without blinking, as if she wanted to see through Lu Ye's heart. She gritted her teeth and said word by word, "He's a despicable, shameless, sinister, and cunning person. He's my lifelong enemy." Lu Yi looked thoughtful. "It seems like that person is very strong." Ghost said, "He is indeed very strong, much stronger than me. But he shouldn't have offended me." "What will happen to those who offend you?" "Heh." Ghost sneered. "That's hard to say. But after I become Yu Yao, I'll beat him up until he kneels and calls for his mother." Lu Yi nodded. "Call me when the time comes. I'll go and watch the show." "You still want to put on an act?" Ghost suddenly jumped up in anger and pointed at Lu Ye's nose. "Show your true face, Fa Wuzuan. I've already recognized you. Although your disguise is good, don't think you can fool my eyes." Lu Yi looked surprised. "Fa Wuzuan? The Fa Wuzuan who shone in the chaotic war conference? Keep pretending." Ghost sneered. Although she didn't know why Li Taibai's disguise as Fa Wuzuan was flawless, some things couldn't stand up to scrutiny. Lu Yi shook his head. "I don't know what you're talking about." Ghost saw that Lu Yi refused to admit it. She raised her hand and took out her musical note. "I'd like to see how long you can be so stubborn." After saying this, he found Fa Wuzuan's musical imprint and sent out a message. Then he looked at Lu Yi with an air of complacency, as if he wanted to expose his ugly face. If Li Taibai was really Fa Wuzuan, then he wouldn't dare to reply in front of her. In this way, she could confirm his identity. But what surprised Ghost was that after a moment, there was a reply from the musical note. She hurriedly checked and found that it was really Fa Wuzuan's reply. It was only a simple sentence. "What's the matter?" Ghost was completely dumbfounded. She had been staring at Lu Yi and didn't see any strange movements from him. It was impossible for him to secretly reply. Then what was with Fa Wuzuan's reply? He couldn't have asked someone else to help him reply. Musical notes were for everyone's own use. It was impossible for others to use them. Could it be that she was wrong? Li Taibai was Li Taibai, and Fa Wuzuan was Fa Wuzuan? But how could there be two people so similar in this world? While she was lost in thought, Fa Wuzuan sent another message. Ghost could only reply, "Nothing, just checking to see if you're dead." "I think you're itching for a beating." Ghost couldn't help but twitch her eyes and quickly put away the musical note. End of chapter. Chapter 1487. Strange, it's really strange. Ghost scratched her head, a puzzled look on her face. No matter how she looked at it, Li Taibai and Fa Wuzuan were almost the same except for their different looks and voices. This was why she had made such a judgment. But reality proved that they were not the same person. Were there really two people who were so similar in this world? Is there anything else? Lu Yi looked at her. Ghost shook her head. She didn't have anything special to ask, she was just curious about who had set up the restriction here. Lu Yi raised his hand and gestured for her to go ahead. Ghost curled her lips and turned around to leave. She had only taken a few steps when she suddenly recalled something. She turned around and said, "Oh right, I've also called Parker over. He's quite pitiful. He couldn't return home all these years and has been wandering around. The Matchless Island is not bad. If he can stay here, he'll have a home in this vast 10,000 elephant sea." After Ghost finished speaking, she left. Lu Yi was a little surprised. She didn't expect Ghost to call Puku. Lu Yi had thought about calling Puku over to Matchless Island. Matchless Island was short of people, and Puku was quite strong. If he could come to Matchless Island, he would definitely strengthen the foundation of Matchless Island. However, his identity here was a little special, so it was not convenient for him to do so. Most importantly, he wasn't sure if Puku would be willing to come. Puku and Chu Shen could be considered as his only two good friends in the Wanxiang galaxy. However, Lu Yi wasn't very clear about Puku's background. He could only confirm that this guy had an extraordinary background based on their past interactions. It was impossible for someone with an extraordinary background like him to not have a place to stay in the Wanxiang Sea. They usually belonged to some force, but Puku had always been alone, which was strange. Now, there was no need to worry about it. Ghost had called Puku. If Puku was willing to come, it would be best. If not, Lu Yi didn't need to make any unnecessary attempts. On another deserted island less than half a day's journey from Matchless Island, Lu Ye's doppelganger was sitting upright. After instructing Ghost to go to Matchless Island, Lu Yi expected that Ghost would have doubts about his identity, so he had his doppelganger hold Fa Wuzuan's musical note and wait here. Sure enough, Ghost wanted to use the musical note to determine that Lu Yi was Fa Wuzuan. It was true that other people wouldn't be able to use the musical notes, but the doppelganger could use them. This way, Spectre's doubts could be dispelled. In the cave, not long after Ghost left, Chu Shen came again and told Lu Yi some bad news. Senior brother, our Matchless Island might be attacked. As expected. Lu Yi nodded. Translator's note. Events a person's names. Calm. Calm. As the saying goes, an innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth. When a force was not strong enough to occupy a spiritual island, it was natural for others to want to snatch it away. Especially recently, several forces had sent people to investigate the situation on Wushuang Island, both openly and secretly. Obviously, they were trying to find out the truth. He had brought Tang Jun here long ago to prepare for this moment. With Yu Yao around, the spiritual island's ability to protect itself was completely different from without Yu Yao. What are you going to do? Lu Yi asked. Of course I'm going to guard the island. I'll kill whoever dares to snatch it. Chu Shen's expression was cold. He wanted to do something. The Matchless Island could be said to be his best chance. Naturally, he would not let it go easily. But it seems like you can't make use of the power from Che Ling boundary. Chu Shen said, it doesn't matter. Right now, we can't hide the fact that the Peerless Island is reviving. However, those slightly more powerful forces all want to save face. Previously, there were some forces who sent people to contact me wanting to recruit us, but I rejected them all. Therefore, these forces won't make a move casually. Right now, those who can't wait to make a move on the Peerless Island are all unrated forces. These forces did not have a suitable base in the Vientiane Sea. Seeing that the Matchless Island was being revived, they were naturally tempted. They were like hungry dogs fighting for food. Even if it was a bone without any meat, it would still be tempting. Hence, even if a force were to attack the Matchless Island, their overall ability would not be too strong. This was also the reason why Chu Shen decided to guard the island. If some forces were to attack the Matchless Island, Matchless Palace would not be able to defend the island with their current ability. Another point was that the forces might not be unaware of Chu Shen's background. It was not worth it to offend an expert like Jiao Yen for the sake of a spiritual island. Only those mediocre forces who were not aware of Chu Shen's identity would have thoughts that they should not have. It's no secret that Tang Jun is on the Matchless Island. If they dare to make a move, they definitely have the ability to suppress Tang Jun. It's better to be careful. Chu Shen said, I know. However, my mother told me before that among the forces on the Vientiane Sea, other than some of the major forces, there are very few Yu Yao late-stage experts. This is because those who have cultivated to the late stage of Yu Yao are all focused on studying how to break through to the Rizhao stage. How would they have the time to guard the Vientiane Sea? Hence, most of the Yu Yao in the Vientiane Sea are either early or middle stage experts. Elder Tang Jun has the cultivation of a middle stage Yu Yao. If they want to suppress him, they will have to send out 1 or 2 early stage Yu Yao. This way, the pressure we have to face will be much less. Lu Yi nodded. Since you have a plan, then go ahead and do it. However, don't force yourself. If the disparity in strength is too great, it's fine to give up the Matchless Island. Without the Matchless Island, he could build another spiritual island. He would just have to start from scratch. I know. However, senior brother, I would like to ask for some support from you. Lu Yi did not say anything. He silently took out some formation plates and handed them to Chu Shun. Chu Shun received them happily. "Thank you, big brother." This guy did not even bother to hide anymore. 2 days later, Pu Ku, who had received Ghost's invitation, rushed to the Matchless Island. Ghost's message was vague. It was not until Pu Ku entered the Matchless Island that he realized how extraordinary it was. When he heard that this spiritual island was just a deserted island 2 months ago, he was even more shocked. Realizing the huge potential of the unparalleled island in the future, Pu Ku decided to stay. To him, an ordinary spiritual island wouldn't be able to attract him. However, the unparalleled island was different. He wanted to see with his own eyes what this spiritual island would be like in the future. Of course, there was another reason. This place was not far from the fishing island. When the fishing season was over and Bai Ling returned, it would be very convenient for him to go fishing again. When he found out that Li Taibai was here, he happily came to visit. In the cave, Lu Yi received him warmly. After chatting for a while, Ghost came over to join in the fun. She was overjoyed when she talked about how she had mistakenly thought that Li Taibai was Fa Wuzuan. While the three of them were chatting, a sudden buzzing sound came from outside. The loud sound reverberated throughout the Matchless Island, causing their eardrums to tremble. The three of them looked at each other and dashed out of the cave. When they looked up, they saw a group of people standing in the air outside the protective formation of the Matchless Island. There were at least 100 of them. They were led by a man and a woman. Both of them had the cultivation of Yu Yao. The man, in particular, was in the mid-stage Yu Yao. At that moment, he had his hands behind his back and was looking down coldly. On the Matchless Island, a group of Matchless Palace cultivators rushed out after the commotion. They gathered together and looked at the newcomers nervously. Chu Shun stood at the front of the group. Behind him was Tang Jun, who had his eyes lowered and his hands hidden in his sleeves. In terms of formation, the Matchless Palace was undoubtedly at a great disadvantage. Not only was there a huge difference in numbers, but their overall strength was also incomparable. The other side had 2 Yu Yao cultivators, while the Matchless Palace only had 1. The other side had close to 100 Lunar Mansion cultivators. Almost 10 of them were in the late stage, and half of them were in the mid-stage. On the other hand, the Matchless Palace had more than 20 people, and all of them were in the early stage. 2 days ago, Chu Shun had told Lu Yi that the Matchless Island was likely to be attacked, so he was not surprised to see this scene. Those who had set their sights on the Matchless Island now would not be too strong. If they could not even handle such a small situation, how could the Matchless Island establish itself on the Vientiane Sea in the future? He stood at the front of the group and shouted in an imposing manner, "Who are you?" The mid-stage Yu Yao cultivator leading the group said slowly, "Carp Island's Nanxingzhen." Chu Shun looked carefree and did not show any mercy with his words. "What bullshit Carp Island? I've never heard of it. Why you here? Why have you triggered the protective formation of the Matchless Island?" Since they knew that they were not here with good intentions, there was no need to be polite. Moreover, they triggered the formation as soon as they arrived. That was how the loud noise was caused. They were indeed arrogant. Nanxingzhen did not mind and said indifferently, "Of course we are here for important matters. I wonder who is in charge of your island? Please come forward to discuss." Although he said that, his eyes were fixed on Tang Jun. He probably thought that Tang Jun was the one in charge of the Matchless Island. This was an indisputable judgment. Among this group of lunar mansions, there was only one Yu Yao. Naturally, Yu Yao would be in charge. Chu Shun shouted, "Old man, I think your eyes are blurry. I am talking to you, and you are asking who is in charge. I am the island master of the Matchless Island, the palace master of the Matchless Palace." Nanxingzhen frowned, obviously surprised. He turned to look at one of the lunar mansions at the side and transmitted his voice to ask something. The lunar mansions replied. Nanxingzhen nodded slightly, as if confirming Chu Shen's identity. He then looked at Chu Shen and said, "Since you are the island master of the Matchless Island, I will get straight to the point. The Carp Island has taken a liking to this spiritual island and intends to take over it." Chapter 1488. Ha! Chu Shen chuckled. "Old man, You're being unreasonable. Why should I give up my treasures just because you've taken a fancy to me? I've even taken a fancy to your wife. Are you going to give up your treasures or not? Cold sweat dripped down the foreheads of the newly recruited constellations. They felt that their palace lord was truly audacious. He actually dared to speak to a mid-stage Yu Yao in such a manner. Little did they know that Chu Shen was of noble birth, and his mother was a sunshine expert. Yu Yao had seen countless sunshine experts, so she wasn't too afraid of Yu Yao. If Nan Xingzhen was like this, he really wouldn't be able to put on airs in front of him. Behind Chu Shen, the woman named Han Si frowned. She couldn't help but glance at Chu Shen, as if she couldn't understand how this brat could even say such shameless words. Even if the other party didn't come with good intentions, there were some things that could be said and some things that couldn't be said in a battle between cultivators. Many tragedies were caused by careless talk. Impudent! Nan Xingzhen shouted. The woman beside him also glared at Chu Shen with a cold gaze. Her eyes were filled with killing intent. Impudent your mother! Chu Shen didn't have the bearing of a palace lord at all. He stomped his foot and scolded, "If you want to fight, then hurry up and fight. Stop being so pretentious and annoying." Nan Xingzhen nodded slightly. He didn't want to waste any more words with Chu Shen. Instead, he looked at the constellations behind Chu Shen and said, "Do you all want to be buried together with this ignorant junior? If anyone is willing to leave now, this old man can spare his life." Attacking the enemy's mind was the key. Nan Xingzhen was old and experienced, so he naturally understood this principle. Even if his side was far stronger than the Peerless Island, one side was attacking while the other was defending. If he could divide the other side's strength with words, he could also reduce some unnecessary resistance. Especially when he knew that the unparalleled palace had just been established not long ago. These constellations were all recruited from the recruitment island and had no loyalty to speak of. As soon as his voice fell, Chu Shen opened his mouth and said, "Everyone, although this old man is a little ugly, what he said is right. If anyone wants to leave now, this island master can open the array and let them leave. Of course, if you are willing to stay and work together with me, that would be the best. However, if you are willing to stay but still try to be sneaky, or even secretly do something disagreeable, then don't blame this palace master for being impolite. Whatever you choose, I, Chu Shen, will not force you." His words surprised Nan Xingzhen quite a bit. He had lived for so many years, but he had never seen anything like this. Now was the time to gather people's hearts. Even if they had to offer generous conditions, they had to move people and make them stay and work hard. Why would they take the initiative to let people go? As expected, he was still young and naive. Indeed, there were people who were hesitating. On the surface, the difference in their strength was too big. Even if they were in a defensive position, it would be difficult for them to win this battle. Once they lost, the defensive array would be broken and their fate would be worrying. Hence, after a moment of hesitation, someone looked ashamed and cupped his fists towards Chu Shen. "I'm sorry, Palace Master." Chu Shen was not disappointed and only nodded slightly. "It's human nature. Brother, you don't have to take it to heart." He raised his hand and pointed, "Which direction do you want to go? I will open the array and let you leave." That person hurriedly rushed towards the direction Chu Shen pointed. A few people cupped their fists and bowed, following closely behind that person. Seeing this, Nan Xingzhen struck while the iron was hot. "I will give you 10 breaths of time. If you insist on stubbornly resisting, when the island is broken, it will be the day of your death." Once this was said, a few more people left. Chu Shen was expressionless. After those people reached the designated location, he opened a gap in the array and let them leave the unparalleled island. "Is there anyone else who wants to leave?" he asked. From Zhaolai Island, he had recruited more than 20 constellations. Now there were only 7 left. It could be said that more than half of them had left. No one moved. Chu Shen found it strange, because he clearly felt that among the people who stayed, everyone was nervous and looked very scared. Yet they did not move. "Why aren't you leaving?" He looked at the remaining people in confusion. Someone's expression stiffened and said, "Palace Master, where can we go if we leave?" Are we still going to Zhaolai Island to work and live a life of hunger and hunger? I've had enough of those days. Rather than going to Zhaolai Island, I might as well stay and fight. Chu Shen laughed. Aren't you afraid that they will kill you when the island is broken? That person wiped the cold sweat on his face. But so what if I am afraid? The path of cultivation is full of obstacles. Where is there no danger? Furthermore, Palace Master, you look like you are unmoving like a mountain. It seems like you have other plans. Palace Master, our cultivation is similar. If you are not afraid, then I can only not be afraid. Is that what all of you think? Chu Shen looked at the others. Everyone nodded. Someone even asked, Palace Master, do we still have powerful reinforcements hiding in the dark? Otherwise, how could Chu Shen be so calm? Chu Shen did not deny it. He laughed loudly. Very good. From now on, all of you will be my Chu Shen's sworn brothers. In the future, as long as you have a piece of spirit jade from me, Chu Shen, I will not let you suffer. He suddenly turned to look at the woman called Hansi. You want to stay too? Is there a problem? Hansi asked back. No problem. Chu Shen smiled brightly. Those early constellations were willing to stay because they guessed that he had some plans. Hence, they decided to take a gamble. He did not understand what this Hansi was thinking. But to him, this was a good thing. Hansi was a late-stage constellation cultivator. She was not weak. She could increase their strength if she stayed. The world is full of fools. There is a way to live, but you don't want to take it. Since that is the case, this old man will satisfy you. Nan Xingzhen snorted coldly. He waved his hand, and the many constellations behind him scattered. In an instant, the spiritual power in the air became chaotic. Multicolored rays of light started to bloom, fiercely crashing down on the protective formation. Rumbling sounds rang out continuously. The entire Supreme Parallel Island was shaking, and ripples appeared on the protective formation's light screen. How lively! On one side of the Supreme Parallel Island, Pu Ku took a swig of wine from his wine gourd. I didn't expect to see such a lively scene as soon as I arrived. Yu Ling sneered, you should still be able to make it if you leave now. This spiritual island is not bad. I plan to stay here for a while. Pu Ku put away his wine gourd. However, if Island Master does not have any other plans, then we might have to go and fight Yu Yao. As he spoke, he looked at the woman at the early stage of Yu Yao. The other side had 2 Yu Yao, while they only had 1. Tang Jun could restrain Nan Xingzhen, but the woman Yu Yao was out of his league. If she really attacked without restraint, no matter how strong the protective formation of the Supreme Parallel Island was, it would still be broken. I remember that dried skeleton general. Ling Yun's expression was bitter. That guy was not the real Yu Yao, but he almost wiped us out. This woman is the real Yu Yao. We are no match for her. Besides, she glanced at Lu Yi. He is not Fa Wuzuan. Pu Ku nodded. You're right. However, this place is not the tomb. There is more space to move around. Have you decided? Ling Yun asked. I have no choice, but you still have a choice. She had been brought here by Fa Wuzuan. Fa Wuzuan was Chu Shen's big brother. If she did not do her best to protect the island, Fa Wuzuan would definitely not let her go. Pu Ku smiled. When have you ever seen me indecisive? Lu Yi, who had been silent all this time, suddenly flipped his hand. An item appeared in his palm. Who will take the lead? The two of them immediately looked over. Ling Yun was stunned. Why do you have this? It was a twin chi-linked branch array disc. The island master gave it to me. Lu Yi blurted out. Ling Yun and Pu Ku did not doubt him. With Chu Shen's relationship with Fa Wuzuan, obtaining a few formation discs from Fa Wuzuan was no big deal. Then this is a good idea. Ling Yun nodded slightly. Initially, she had thought that even if the 3 of them worked together, they would still be no match for Yu Yao. At most, they would only be able to hold her back for a while. Moreover, there was still a huge risk involved. However, if they had the help of a formation disc, they might be able to put up a fight. I am a ghost cultivator. I am not suitable. Pu Ku also said, you are a weapon cultivator. You will take the lead. This was Lu Ye's original plan, so he naturally had no objections. Although the battle against the dried skeleton general had been very difficult, he had been using the Crimson Dragon Saber at the time, which had affected his strength slightly. Moreover, his cultivation level was only at the middle stage of the constellation realm. Now that his strength had increased, with the three of them in a formation, dealing with an early stage Yu Yao might not be a problem. However, that woman seemed to be a Dharma cultivator. Therefore, they had to be on guard against her having any strange secret arts or Dharma treasures. The spiritual island buzzed incessantly. Nan Xingzhen revealed a shocked expression. It was only now that he realized that the defensive formation of Peerless Island was a little unusual. He had thought that such a defensive formation could be easily broken. Who knew that the level of the formation was so high and its defenses so strong? To set up such a large formation, the cost would not be small. What kind of background did the people of Peerless Palace have? What he did not know was that Chu Shen had taken 5 million spirit jades from Lu Yi. A total of 4 million spirit jades had been invested in setting up the formation, leaving only 1 million spirit jades as backup. How could such a large formation not be strong? It could be said that Peerless Island's current formation was made entirely out of spirit jades. Moreover, the island's cosmic energy was abundant. If it was set up a little longer and the formation absorbed enough cosmic energy, its defensive power would definitely become even stronger. The current formation of Peerless Island, in terms of level and scale, might not be as good as the high-class spiritual islands occupied by some big factions. However, it was definitely far ahead of the low-class spiritual islands. The only shortcoming was that the formation had been set up for too short a time, and the energy stored was not enough. Nan Xingzhen obviously knew about this, so he concluded that the formation would not be able to last for too long. As long as they continued to attack, the formation would be broken sooner or later. Amidst the buzzing, Chu Shen called out to the people who stayed behind and did a head count. Including Little Dumb, Crooked Tooth, and the others, there were a total of 13 people at the early stage of the constellation realm. With a flip of his hand, he took out a few formation discs and distributed them. It's not enough to just take a beating and not fight back. Everyone, find the core of the formation and counterattack however you want. The group's eyes lit up. After receiving the formation discs, they immediately split up and took action. End of chapter. Chapter 1489. Although formations had the ability to maintain themselves before the energy reserves were exhausted, they still needed to be controlled by cultivators in order to maximize the formation's power. To put it simply, the protective formation of Peerless Island had stored up some energy, but when it was defending against the attacks of the enemy, this energy was constantly being depleted. Once the energy was depleted, the protective formation would no longer be able to maintain itself. There was only one way to maintain it, which was to artificially control the formation and inject the cultivator's spirit power into the formation's core or find a way to stimulate the power of spirit jades to replenish the formation. But no matter what, manpower was needed. And Peerless Island's biggest problem was the lack of manpower. Therefore, Chu Shen didn't even think about defending because in this situation, only defending was useless. Only by counterattacking would they have a glimmer of hope. A qualified formation not only needed to have the ability to defend, but also the ability to counterattack. Of the 4 million spirit jades Chu Shen spent, half of it was used to set up the formation's defense, and the other half was used to deploy some offensive spirit treasures. Each of those spirit treasures was a weapon used to attack cities and strongholds. They were completely different from the spirit treasures cultivators normally used. These spirit treasures were expensive and difficult to control. It was difficult for a single cultivator to activate them, even if they were at the late stage of the constellation realm. These things were often equipped on starships in the starry sky. However, at this moment, the many early-stage constellation realm cultivators on Peerless Island borrowed the power of the formation disk to connect their chi. They could freely borrow each other's power and easily combine the power of several people into one. In this way, the siege weapons placed at various points of the formation could be activated. Including Chu Shen, the 14 early-stage constellation realm cultivators were divided into 3 teams and arrived at the 3 formation cores of the offensive formation. Seeing this, Nan Xingjian quickly transmitted his voice, "Be careful." He himself wasn't afraid of Peerless Island's counterattack. After all, his strength was there. However, the hundreds of constellation realm cultivators he brought might not be able to resist. If they couldn't dodge in time, it was very likely that there would be some unnecessary casualties. The Koi island he belonged to wasn't a very strong force. This time, in order to capture Peerless Island, they almost went all out. Once there were casualties, it would be an irreparable loss. Just as he finished speaking, a buzzing sound was heard from within the Wushuang Island. Soon after, a light pillar suddenly shot out from a certain part of the island, heading straight for the densest part of the crowd. Nan Xingjian's face turned cold because he realized that this attack was incomparably ferocious. It far exceeded his expectations. The protective array protected the outside but not the inside. When these people attacked from the outside, all their attacks were blocked by the protective array's light screen. However, the attacks from the inside of the island were not affected at all. They went straight through the protective array's light screen. His speed was as fast as lightning. Although a portion of the cultivators reacted quickly and dodged, there were still a portion of them who failed to react in time. The Southern True Traveler's figure flashed and appeared in front of these people. He raised his hand and grabbed the violent light beam in his palm. This power, which was enough to shake Yu Yao, only caused his body to tremble slightly before he returned to normal. However, before he could breathe a sigh of relief, another fierce power erupted from another array core on Peerless Island. A pitch-black light passed through the protective array's protective array and suddenly twisted, transforming into the shape of a fierce tiger. It roared ferociously and pounced in another direction. Nan Xingjian didn't have enough time to stop it. Fortunately, there was another woman, Yu Yao. She summoned a protective magic weapon and blocked this attack. Then came the third attack. Chu Shen and the others were divided into 3 small teams. Even so, they could only activate the power of the 3 spirit artifacts placed in the offensive array. This third attack was slightly different from the previous 2. The attack had clearly been launched, yet no one was able to see it. Only an enormous bang resounded before someone fell down dizzily, and it seemed as if he was about to fall into the myriad sea. If that happened, then he would definitely die. Fortunately, there were many people from Koi Island this time. His companions nearby noticed in time and hurriedly came to his rescue, saving him from disaster. A sound attack. The Southern True Traveler's expression changed again as he stared at the source of the third attack. It was the location of Chu Shen's team. He really couldn't understand. This Peerless Island didn't look strong, so how could it have such a strange treasure? This kind of spirit artifact was worth at least 100,000 spirit jades. Moreover, it wasn't something that could be bought with money. What he didn't know was that Chu Shen had many treasures on him. Although not all of them were suitable to act as array cores, there were always 1 or 2 that could. This treasure that could activate a sound attack was one of them. Its main feature was that it was invisible and impossible to guard against. The 3 counterattacks of Peerless Island were launched almost at the same time. This made the people of Koi Island realize that this wasn't a bone that could be gnawed on. On Peerless Island, Tang Jun, who had his hands in his sleeves, suddenly turned his head and looked at Ban Si, who was not far away. "I don't care why you came here and why you didn't leave. But if you dare to harm our island, I won't let you off easily." Recently, he had been working with Ban Si to manage the deployment of the large array on the island. The more they worked together, the more he felt that this woman was not simple. Such a person was very likely to have an extraordinary background. Tang Jun had also investigated openly and secretly to find out the origin of Ban Si, but he did not gain much. Although Peerless Island seemed to respect Chu Shen, in fact, it was related to the future of the cultivators of Qinglidao World. If they could find their way home one day, the people of Qinglidao World could also come to the 10,000 Elephant Sea and establish a foothold on Peerless Island to cultivate. It could be said that although Tang Jun hadn't been here for long, he had completely approved of this place. Naturally, he didn't want anything to happen to Peerless Island. He could basically see through the intentions of the others, except for Ban Ci, so he warned her to prevent her from having any thoughts that she shouldn't have. Ban Ci was stunned for a moment, then she immediately pursed her lips and smiled. Elder Tang, don't worry. Although it's not easy to explain to you, I can guarantee that even if something happens to me, I won't let anything happen to the island master. Tang Jun gazed deeply at her, as if he wanted to look into the depths of her heart. He more or less knew about Chu Shen's background. Now that he heard Ban Si's words, he could roughly guess her background. Then I'll leave it to you. When he nodded slightly, his figure rushed into the sky and went straight to Nanxingzhen. Almost at the same time, on the other side of Peerless Island, 3 figures also rushed into the sky and went straight to the Yuyao woman. These 3 figures were naturally the 3 people led by Lu Yi. Among the enemies there were 2 Yuyao. Tang Jun could pin down Nanxingzhen, so if the 3 of them could contend with the Yuyao woman, the pressure on Peerless Island would be greatly reduced. At that time, Peerless Island would only need to face a group of star mansions. Chu Shen and the others could control the 3 offensive arrays and stimulate the power of the spirit artifacts in the array cores, so they might be able to achieve something. In an instant, the 2 mid-stage Yuyao cultivators clashed, their magic power surging endlessly as they fought in full swing. Before Lu Yi and the others could approach the Yuyao woman, several invading star mansions rushed forward to meet them. The one at the forefront had a sturdy body and was brimming with vitality. Surprisingly, he was a body cultivator. Originally, when he saw Lu Ye's group of 3's loose formation, he didn't pay them much attention. Unexpectedly, as they rapidly approached, he saw Lu Ye's group of 3 shining with spirit light as their spirit energy converged and fused together. In an instant, the simplest of 3 arrays was formed. However, even the simplest array caused Lu Ye's aura to soar. The body cultivator was shocked, but it was too late to stop himself. The moment the 3 arrays were formed, Lu Ye's speed suddenly increased and he pounced on the body cultivator. The aura of death suddenly descended, causing the body cultivator's entire body to turn cold. He roared angrily and punched out. This punch could be said to be a sudden burst of all his strength. Even the abundant blood and qi in his body withered in an instant as he punched out. This punch was ferocious and unparalleled. Under this punch, Lu Ye's figure shattered. However, a saber light flashed from the shattered figure. Pu Ku and Ghost, who were not far from Lu Yi, were stunned. They didn't expect Li Taibai's strength to be so great. Pu Ku, in particular, had known Lu Yi for almost 2 years. It could be said that they met not long after Lu Yi came to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. However, Pu Ku had never seen him fight, so he naturally didn't know how strong he was. Only now did he realize that this fishing buddy of his who had once asked him for advice on the art of fishing was actually hiding his strength. What surprised Pu Ku and Ghost even more was that they vaguely saw some familiar traces in this saber light. They couldn't help but recall the scene of the dried skeleton general's death battle in the tomb. The 2 of them turned their heads and looked at each other, speechless. The body cultivator was still in his punching posture. Lu Ye's figure had clearly shattered, but as the saber light bloomed, his figure appeared behind the body cultivator and continued to rush forward without looking. Behind him, under the turbulence of spiritual power, the body cultivator's body suddenly split into pieces and fell toward the 10,000 Elephant Sea. The cuts were neat and tidy. As the body cultivator approached, the constellation mansions didn't even have time to react before they saw Lu Yi and the other 2 charging over aggressively. Like a tiger in a flock of sheep, Lu Ye's saber light flashed, Pu Ku waved the fishing rod in his hand, and Ghost's 5 fingers formed a claw and broke through the enemy's defense line. Even if they were all late-stage constellation mansions, they couldn't block any of their attacks. Several constellation mansions who came to greet them didn't even know how they died. There was a huge gap in strength between late-stage constellation mansions. Not to mention Lu Yi, even Pu Ku and Ghost weren't easy to deal with. One was ranked more than 100, while the other was close to 200. They could be said to be the top existences in the constellation realm. Only other constellation mansions on the same ranking could contend with them. The other constellation mansions weren't even on the same level. Moreover, the three of them had formed a formation. How could these constellation mansions who had even been on the ranking be a match for the three of them? End of chapter. Chapter 1490. When Lu Yi and the others broke through the enemy's defensive line, the Yuyao woman suddenly looked in their direction. When she saw the blood of her own cultivators splattering across the sky, she felt as if a knife was being twisted in her heart. Her eyes were sharp, and she immediately saw the strength of Lu Yi and the others. She realized that these three were not ordinary constellations, and were likely to have left their names on the rankings. Otherwise, it would be impossible for a simple tripartite formation to have such terrifying strength. Not daring to be careless, she raised her hand and summoned an object, smashing it towards Lu Yi and the others. It was a magic treasure that looked like a seal. It was clearly a very small thing, but after she took it out, it suddenly became the size of a small mountain in an instant. The bottom of the seal was dark red, like a vermilion red, but also like a human's blood. There were also 4 large words engraved on it: boundless heaven and earth. When the seal fell, whether it was Lu Yi, Pu Ku, or Guiling, all of them felt their bodies sink, as if an invisible mountain was pressing down on their shoulders. Lu Ye's expression was cold, and he realized how powerful the seal was. It had such power even before it fell, and if it really hit them, they would probably be smashed to pieces in an instant. When their chi was connected, he could clearly feel that Pu Ku and Guiling were also under the same pressure as him. His expression unchanged, he brandished the coiling mountain saber, and a continuous stream of saber light shot out. Speaking of which, this was the first time he had directly experienced the power of a magic treasure. It was indeed mysterious, unfathomable, and extremely strange. The woman was only at the early stage of Yuyao, and her magic treasure was already so powerful. If she summoned more magic treasures, none of the three would have an easy time. Compared to the withered skeleton general they had defeated before, this woman's strength was not just a little bit higher. As the saber light swept out, something seemed to be cut open, and Lu Ye's body suddenly lightened. On the other side, Pu Ku and Guiling used some unknown method to break free of the seal's binding power. In an instant, the three of them moved out of the seal's range. The seal smashed down fiercely, but it hit nothing but air. Before Lu Yi and the others could catch their breath, the seal once again flew high into the air and fell in their direction. The three of them could only try to find a way to escape. The woman was not only dealing with Lu Yi and the other two, she was also activating her defensive magic treasure to help the constellations under her command withstand the counterattack from the unparalleled island. Although she was alone, she was able to cause several attacks from Chu Shen and the others to fail. The remaining attacks were not blocked, but the constellations were on guard, so it was difficult for them to succeed. Unparalleled Island's counterattack was ineffective, but the enemy's attacks were endless. The protective array's light screen was dimming at a speed visible to the naked eye, and it was estimated that it would be broken soon. Once the protective array was broken, the fate of the early-stage constellations on the island would be worrying. There was only one way to resolve this situation. He could either restrain Yuyao and prevent her from being distracted, or he could go around her and slaughter the invading constellations. Lu Yi led Pu Ku and Ghost, trying to rush to the woman's side several times, but they were all blocked by the seal. This magic treasure looked extremely stupid, but it was extremely powerful. He tried to ignore the other party's attacks and kill the constellations, but he was also blocked by the seal. This was the result of Yuyao not being able to deal with them wholeheartedly. If she did, their situation would be even worse. Compared to the man from Yuyao whom he lured to the mermaid clan's territory, this woman was much more difficult to deal with. Although the woman's cultivation was weaker, her magic treasure was powerful. That man from Yuyao did not use any magic treasure when he was chasing after him. He saw Elder Tang Jun fighting fiercely with Nan Xingzhen, saw the three of them dodging the enemy's magic treasure attacks, saw the enemy's fierce attacks on the array, and saw the array on the verge of collapse. He knew that the situation was hopeless, and that the unparalleled island would not be able to survive this time. Suddenly, he met a gaze that turned back to him. Chu Shen frowned. because the person who turned back to look at him was the woman called Bansi. He did not know where this woman came from, nor did he know where she came from. He did not know why she was standing here all this time, neither coming to help him nor forming a formation with Pharaoh and the others. He saw Bansi's mouth move, but he did not hear any sound. However, from the shape of her mouth, he could tell that, "Don't worry." At a time like this, what did she want him to worry about? Chu Shen's heart was filled with confusion. Then, he saw Bansi lightly fly out of the unparalleled island, single-handedly approaching the woman from Yuyao. As Bansi approached, the woman from Yuyao clearly sensed her. She did not pay her too much attention, and casually pointed in her direction. A ray of light bloomed, piercing through Bansi's body without any resistance. "You overestimate yourself," the woman from Yuyao snorted. She did not feel anything about casually killing a late-stage constellation cultivator. It was like crushing an ant. Just as she was about to retract her gaze, her expression suddenly changed. This was because Bansi, whose body had been pierced by her, did not show any signs of pain, nor did she stop. Not even a drop of blood flowed from the wound. There was still a faint smile on her face. How is this possible? The woman from Yuyao's face was filled with shock. Another ray of light shot out, and another hole appeared in Bansi's body. However, there was still no blood. Before she could do anything else, her expression suddenly changed, and she turned to look in the direction of Lu Yi and the others. At this moment, Lu Yi was leading Pu Ku and Yu Ling to avoid the seal's attack. He took the opportunity to fly to the top of the seal. The pitch-black mountain saber shone brightly, and layers of heavy-pressure spiritual inscriptions rapidly formed on it. Lu Yi had never tried to form so many heavy-pressure spiritual inscriptions on the mountain saber. The moment the spiritual inscriptions took shape, Lu Yi felt as if he was not holding a mountain saber, but a mountain range. While the woman from Yuyao was distracted by Bansi, he ferociously slashed at the seal. The seal was a Dharma treasure. Lu Yi had never thought of destroying it. That was unrealistic. No matter how strong he was, he could not destroy such a Dharma treasure. He only wanted to slash this Dharma treasure into the 10,000 Elephant Sea. This thing was too annoying. If he wanted to deal with the woman from Yuyao or avoid her, he had to destroy this Dharma treasure. The seawater of the 10,000 Elephant Sea was a natural aid. As long as he slashed this Dharma treasure into the 10,000 Elephant Sea, it would be quickly eroded. At that time, it would not be able to unleash its full power. After seeing through Lu Ye's intentions, how could the woman from Yuyao let him have his way? Just as she was about to control the seal's power, she heard Bansi speak. "You'd better not look anywhere else." Suddenly, a strange power surged out from Bansi. The woman from Yuyao was shocked and hurriedly looked at Bansi. She saw Bansi place her hands in front of her chest and form an extremely mysterious seal. Her power surged, and a dot of black light bloomed in front of her. The black light was just a black dot, but when it appeared, the world seemed to lose its color. The black dot rapidly expanded, enveloping the surroundings. The woman from Yuyao realized that something was wrong and hurriedly tried to retreat. However, to her horror, no matter how hard she tried, she could not outrun the black dot. In the blink of an eye, a huge black sphere appeared beside Peerless Island, enveloping both Bansi and the woman from Yuyao. They disappeared without a trace. Nan Xingzhen and Tang Jun, who were locked in a fierce battle, were both shocked. Even with their vast knowledge and experience, they could not tell what that black sphere was. It seemed to be a secret technique, but it also seemed to be the power of a Dharma treasure. Asterisk boom. Asterisk the huge seal was slashed into the 10,000 Elephant Sea by Lu Ye's saber, kicking up huge waves. At first, the seal did not show any changes, but in the blink of an eye, it flashed wildly. Clearly, the seal was being eroded and destroyed. As the seal sank, it rapidly shrank, disappearing without a trace. Lu Yi and the others had finally broken free from their restraints. There was no longer any need to deal with the woman from Yuyao. They turned around and charged into the crowd that was madly attacking the Grand Array. Even Lu Yi and the others did not expect this to happen. Only when the three of them charged over did the crowd realize that the situation was far from good. Just now, a late-stage celestial constellation body cultivator was instantly torn to shreds by Lu Yi. They had all seen it with their own eyes, so how could they dare to face it head-on? They all used their own methods to try and stop them, but what greeted them was a torrent of saber lights. Among the saber lights, there was occasionally an almost imperceptible thread. Once entangled by this thread, they would instantly lose their freedom of movement. They would either be cut down by Lu Ye's saber lights or have their hearts ripped out by the ghosts that pounced on them. In an instant, death shrouded the entire area. Near Peerless Island, within a 300-kilometer radius, many people were watching this battle from afar. Nan Xingzhen's group was not the only ones who had designs on Peerless Island. However, Carp Island was the most impatient and had acted the fastest. They thought they could take over Peerless Island, so they were the first to attack. It was no secret that Peerless Island had Tang Jun, a mid-stage Yu Yao. However, apart from him, there was no other Yu Yao. Moreover, the entire Peerless Island did not have many people, so their overall cultivation was quite pitiful. No one thought that Carp Island would fail this time. They all thought they had picked up a great bargain. However, the result shocked all of the spectating cultivators. Tang Jun and Nan Xingzhen did not have a large difference in strength, so even if Tang Jun was at a disadvantage, it would be difficult to determine the victor in a short time. This was within the expectations of the spectators. However, the performance of Lu Yi and the others was shocking. At this moment, the three of them were slaughtering the celestial constellation cultivators of Carp Island as if they were vegetables. It was truly a breathtaking sight. Soon, some people recognized that Gui Ling and Pu Ku were powerhouses on the contribution list. Only then did they feel slightly relieved. Chapter 1491. When the powerhouses on the rankings formed a formation, no ordinary constellation mansion could withstand it. If the battlefield was in a space that was unfavorable for movement, it might limit their ability to display their might. However, on the 10,000 manifestation sea, there were no restrictions on movement at all. Numbers no longer mattered. As long as they moved quickly and frequently enough, it would be very difficult for the three people in the formation to be surrounded. This was also the biggest reason why the constellation mansions of Brocade Island were unable to accomplish anything. However, what shocked the spectators the most was not the performance of Lu Yi and the others, but the method that Half CI displayed. No one knew what it was, nor did they know what was going on inside the black sphere. However, a late-stage constellation mansion master was actually able to restrain Yu Yao. This truly subverted their understanding of the world. The cultivators from different forces rejoiced as they watched. Fortunately, Brocade Island had made the first move. Otherwise, regardless of which of their forces attacked Peerless Island, they would definitely suffer heavy losses. The number of cultivators on Peerless Island's side might not be many, and their overall strength wasn't high. However, with these few exceptions, unless these forces joined forces, no one would be able to easily take down Peerless Island. The slaughter continued. Everywhere Lu Yi and the others passed, there would be a rain of blood. The cultivators of Brocade Island continuously fell into the 10,000 manifestation sea, disappearing without a trace. They also tried to join forces to attack, but Lu Yi and the others were too fast. Their movements didn't give them any space to surround them. On the contrary, if any of them were careless, they would definitely be targeted by the three of them. These people had all participated in the Constellation Hall contest before. They had never encountered a powerhouse who had left their names on the rankings before, so they naively believed that even if there was a difference in strength, the difference wouldn't be too great. It wasn't until this confrontation that they realized that although they were all constellation mansions, there were still great differences between them. In less than a cup of tea's time, more than 30 of the 100 constellation mansions had died. Although the number of constellation mansions remaining was not small, they all revealed expressions of fear and their morale plummeted. Not only did they have to guard against Lu Yi and the others' sneak attacks, they also had to guard against the strange attacks coming from inside Peerless Island. They had to deal with this situation until a stern shout rang out, "Retreat!" Nan Xingzhen saw that the situation was not good and gave them an order. If they did not leave, more people would die. It was as if the constellations had been pardoned, and they all used their techniques to escape into the distance. Lu Yi and the other two ignored them, and directly charged towards Nanxingzhen's location. When Nanxingzhen saw this, how could he not know what they were planning? It was obvious that they wanted to join forces with Tang Jun to keep him here. If it were any other constellation mansion that dared to do this, Nanxingzhen would not have cared at all. However, he had also seen the performance of Lu Yi and the others just now, and knew that he could not underestimate them. If he was alone, he would naturally be able to retreat. However, he still had Yu Yao's companion trapped in the strange black sphere. If he left, his companion would be left behind. Just as he was feeling conflicted, he heard a cracking sound. Looking in the direction of the sound, he was overjoyed. He saw that the strange black ball floating outside the unparalleled island was now like a broken mirror. Countless cracks appeared on it, and from those cracks, an aura that Nanxingzhen was familiar with surged. With a crash, the black ball completely shattered. A figure appeared and hurriedly retreated. Who else could it be but Ban Xi? However, her current condition was clearly not good. She was bleeding from all 7 orifices, and her face was as pale as a sheet of paper. Her aura was as weak as a candle in the wind. Using the body of a constellation mansion to forcibly use that secret technique to trap Yu Yao was indeed a huge price to pay. In front of her, the woman Yu Yao hovered in the air with a cold expression. Her magic power surged violently, and a spell bombarded Ban Xi. She shouted, "Die!" To think that she, Yu Yao, had been trapped by a constellation mansion's secret technique. Although the constellation mansion had paid a huge price, it was still not enough to quell the anger in her heart. Only by killing her could she wash away the shame in her heart. Ban Xi was like a lamp that had run out of oil. Facing such an attack, she had no strength to fight back. If nothing unexpected happened, it would be difficult for her to survive this attack. However, just as the woman Yu Yao was about to use her secret technique, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Ban Xi. Ban Xi was slightly stunned. She had not expected that someone would come to save her life at this time. She looked up and saw a figure blocking the storm in front of her. The figure held a saber in one hand and slowly rotated it. In a daze, Ban Xi seemed to hear the sound of a tsunami. Waves rose and fell, suddenly becoming fierce and violent. The might of the spell arrived. The collision of magic power and spiritual power was like a rock smashing into an egg. The latter could not withstand a single blow. However, the continuous saber light was like an endless wave, shattering layer after layer, turning into a shield without any protection. The figure did not retreat a single step. Back in the merfolk territory, Lui had used this saber to block a mid-stage Yu Yao's attack. At that time, the other party had only attacked casually and had not used her full strength. However, now that she was in a formation with Pike Spectre, there was no reason why she could not block a mid-stage Yu Yao's attack. Amidst the frenzied spell, Lu Ye's figure even advanced forward, although his speed was not fast. This scene shocked many of the cultivators watching the battle from afar. No matter what, they had never imagined that Xing Su would have the ability to resist Yu Yao. Today's events had truly broadened their horizons. They had no choice but to re-evaluate the strength of Peerless Island. If the woman Yu Yao had used a spell to fight Lu Yi and the others from the beginning, Lu Yi felt that his side would have been able to deal with her. However, the woman had summoned a magic treasure that looked like a seal from the beginning. That was why the 3 of them were so helpless. Sensing the strangeness of Lu Ye's saber, the woman Yu Yao was clearly surprised. Just as she was about to test the strength of Lu Yi and the others, she heard Nanxingzhen call out, "Things are getting out of hand. I'm leaving." As soon as he finished speaking, Nanxingzhen calmly retreated. Tang Jun did not stop him. Nanxingzhen had always had the upper hand in the battle between the two. If he wanted to leave, how could Tang Jun stop him? He could only let him go. As soon as Nanxingzhen left, the woman Yu Yao followed. However, before she left, she glared fiercely at Lu Yi, as if blaming him for ruining her plans. In an instant, the soldiers around Peerless Island stopped fighting. The fierce offensive had ended with the attackers paying the price of a few dozen lives. Lu Yi stared in the direction the woman Yu Yao had left in until she disappeared from his sight. Then he turned around and saw Yu Ling standing nearby with the weak half-word. Their eyes met, and half-word nodded slightly at Lu Yi, expressing his thanks. Lu Yi did not say anything. He returned to Peerless Island and entered his own cave. He could faintly hear the cheers of Chu Shen and the others coming from the island. Chu Shen was undoubtedly very happy. He had originally thought that Peerless Island would be lost in today's battle. After all, the difference in strength between the two sides was obvious. However, he was not worried about his own life. If worst came to worst, he could use Jiao Yan's name. He believed that Nan Xingzhen and the others would not dare to kill him. He could also use this to protect his subordinates. However, if he did that, not only would he lose Peerless Island, but he would also break his promise with Jiao Yan. At that time, he would have to obediently return to Che Ling Domain and work under his mother's protection. However, he never imagined that Peerless Island would be saved. Not only did they save it, but they also defeated the invaders until they were forced to flee. His greatest hope was naturally Pharaoh Da. He had a rough idea of Pharaoh Da's strength, but who would have thought that Half-Word's performance would be even more stunning? If Half-Word had not acted at the last moment to trap the woman Yu Yao, it would have been impossible for them to win this battle. It was precisely because the woman Yu Yao was trapped that Pharaoh Da and the others had space to act. However, Pharaoh Da lived up to his name. Using his constellation body to fight against Yu Yao, even though he was in a formation, it was truly amazing. The number of people on Peerless Island had shrunk by half, but Chu Shen was not sad. This was because those who had stayed behind to fight alongside him at that time were all trustworthy people. They would definitely become his subordinates in the future. He had originally thought that all of these people who had been recruited would leave without a trace. After the battle, those who needed to rest and recuperate were recuperating. Chu Shen personally visited Half-Word and expressed his gratitude to her as the island lord. In the cave, Tang Jun sat dejectedly on the futon in front of Lu Yi and sighed deeply. Speaking of which, although he was a Yu Yao, he had not fought many cultivators of the same cultivation level. In the past, he had lived in a place like the Qinglidao world and had not encountered any other Yu Yao. After coming to the Wanxiang Sea, he had not had any conflicts with anyone. It was only today that he realized the gap between him and others. They were both mid-stage Yu Yao, but Nan Xingzhen was undoubtedly much more powerful than him. If not for the time constraints of today's battle, he would have definitely lost if they had continued fighting. This made him feel a sense of defeat. "Why did you call me over?" Tang Jun asked. He had been called over by Lu Yi. Lu Yi glanced at him and roughly guessed his thoughts. He raised his hand and threw a storage ring to him. Tang Jun caught it doubtfully. After a brief inspection, he was shocked. So many spiritual jades. There were almost 1,000,000 spiritual jades in the storage ring. "Where did you get them?" he hurriedly asked. As far as he knew, Li Taibai was also a poor man. When he had first inquired about the Jade Snail Galaxy and was preparing to return, he had specially asked him for some travel expenses. He had not seen him for more than a year. How did he suddenly become so rich? Moreover, judging from the way he had acted, he obviously had more than this. He definitely had more. 1,000,000 spiritual jades. This was not just 1,000,000 spiritual stones. Tang Jun had lived for so many years, but he had never seen so many spiritual jades. Lu Yi did not answer. He only said, "Go and buy 2 decent Dharma treasures." During today's battle, although he had been in a formation with Pu Ku's spirit to fight the enemy, he had also been paying attention to Tang Jun's situation. Tang Jun's foundation was still very solid. Among the mid-stage Yu Yao cultivators, he could not be considered the best, but at least he was within the average standard. The main reason he was not a match for Nan Xingzhen was that his Dharma treasures were not good enough. End of chapter. Chapter 1492. Tang Jun himself was a Dharma cultivator, so the use of Dharma treasures was very important to him. For example, if Tang Jun had a Dharma treasure like a seal in his hands, it would be much easier to deal with the south. Tang Jun had Dharma treasures, but he came from a place like Qinglidao world. How could he have any good stuff? According to the classification of Dharma treasures in the universe, the 2 Dharma treasures he had were below 3-star, which could be said to be very poor. Lu Yi could not tell the grade of Yu Yao's seal. After all, he was only a constellation mansion, but it was definitely above 3-star. Otherwise, it could not have such strange and powerful power. Currently, Tang Jun was the only Yu Yao on Matchless Island. He could be said to be the representative of Matchless Island's combat power. If he could become stronger, he could deal with more complicated and dangerous situations in the future. If not for this consideration, why would Lu Yi give him 1,000,000 spirit jades? Kid, where did you get rich? Tang Jun looked excited. 1,000,000 spiritual jades was not something an ordinary person could take out. Even a small force might not have so many spiritual jades that they could use. Consider it a loan. Remember to return it to me when you have it. Lu Yi looked at him. Tang Jun chuckled and pretended not to hear. When Lu Yi asked for travel expenses, he did not say anything about lending it to him. Now that the spirit jades were in his hands, there was no way he would return it. But then again, if he really used these spirit jades to buy 2 decent Dharma treasures, his personal strength would definitely increase by a lot. When he met Nanxing again, it was clear who would be stronger and who would be weaker. Kid, you're good. I'll accept your filial piety. In the future, as long as I don't die on the Vientiane Sea, I'll ensure your safety. Tang Jun left happily. He didn't waste any time and immediately set off for the island of versatility. He was prepared to listen to Lu Ye's advice and buy 2 decent magic treasures. With 1,000,000 spirit jades, he could buy 2 5-star magic treasures if his requirements weren't too high. The battle had just ended, and the fate of Koi Island was a lesson. Therefore, no one would have any ideas about Matchless Island for a while. Tang Jun could leave quietly and return soon. Not long after Tang Jun left, Chu Shen ran over and sat in front of Lu Yi, saying, "Senior brother, I want to go to Zhaili Island to recruit more people." Previously, Lu Yi had advised him not to recruit constellations that were not strong enough, and he had listened to the advice. However, things were different now. If Unparalleled Island wanted to become stronger, they would need more manpower. At the very least, there had to be enough people to maintain the operation of the formation. In today's battle, the protective formation on the island could not even display 30% of its power because there were too few people. Lu Yi said, "You're from the Che Ling world. Is there anyone you can trust in the Che Ling world or the Wanxiang galaxy?" Chu Shen shook his head and smiled bitterly. "To be honest, before I was promoted to a constellation, I had been cultivating hard in the Thousand Sunset sect and rarely left. Hence, I don't know many people. There are some trustworthy senior brothers and sisters in the Thousand Sunset sect, but most of them are cultivating in other spiritual islands. Even if I invited them, they might not be willing to come." Lu Yi nodded, knowing that this was the truth. For example, the group of cultivators from Jinli Island might have come from a certain domain in a certain galaxy. They did not have a suitable place to stay in the Wanxiang Sea, so they wanted to snatch Unparalleled Island when they saw that it was a good place to stay. However, the Thousand Sunset sect was a sect in a local domain, and they had Jiao Yan behind them. It was easy for them to occupy a spiritual island. The spiritual island they occupied would definitely be better than the current Unparalleled Island. Chu Shen inviting them was equivalent to asking them to come and help. With the agreement with Jiao Yan, not to mention that those people might not be willing to come, Chu Shen himself was not willing to do so. "Then we can only spread the news," said Lu Yi. Chu Shen said, "I think so too. In this vast Wanxiang Sea, there are countless constellations that have no place to stay. Even late-stage constellations can be found everywhere. In today's battle, Unparalleled Island has made a name for itself. If we spread the news, there will be many people coming to join us. However, senior brother, don't worry. I will be strict with the selection. I will definitely not let people with ulterior motives enter Unparalleled Island." With a place like Fair Island, Chu Shen could check the past of these cultivators from the Fair Book on Fair Island. Through their resumes, he could see the character of these cultivators. As long as he was strict with his control, it would not be a big problem even if he recruited some outsiders. Since you have a plan, go ahead and do it. Lu Yi nodded. Suddenly, he thought of something. What's the situation with that Ban Ci? Speaking of which, before today he had only met Ban Ci once. It was Ban Ci who took the initiative to visit him when she first came to Unparalleled Island. After that, she left and did not have any interaction with him. However, in today's battle, this Ban Ci's performance was not like an ordinary constellation. Chu Shen scratched his head and said, I'm not too sure about this senior sister's background. She was recruited by Lucky Star from Fair Island. She came with Elder Tang. Together? Lu Yi frowned. It's just a coincidence. When Elder Tang went to Fair Island, Lucky Star just came to an agreement with Ban Ci. Senior brother, do you think there's something wrong with her? Lu Yi shook his head. I'm just a little curious. With such strength and background, she should be on the ranking list. However, her name is not on the ranking list. It's really strange. Chu Shen agreed. But senior brother, she shouldn't have any bad intentions. You saw the battle today. If senior brother didn't help in time, I'm afraid she would have died. That's what I'm curious about. He was just recruited and received a modest monthly salary. To Ban Ci, Wushuang Island was just a place to stay. Was there a need to work so hard? After thinking for a while, Lu Yi said, Is there such a person in your coachman circle? Chu Shen was not stupid. He immediately connected the dots. Senior brother, you mean? Senior sister Ban Ci was sent by my mother? If not, there was no way to explain why Ban Ci did what she did. But I've never seen this person in my life. She might not be from the coachman circle? Lu Yi said thoughtfully. Perhaps she was a cultivator from another realm in the myriad phenomenon galaxy. With Jiao Yan's status, it wouldn't be difficult for her to find someone Chu Shen had never seen before to protect him. However, Ban Ci's performance today was too shocking. Even Lu Yi couldn't forcefully restrain Yu Yao as a celestial constellation. Of course, Ban Ci paid a heavy price in the end. From this, it could be seen that Ban Ci was not an ordinary person. Her name was not on the ranking list, so it was very likely that she had used a pseudonym. While Lu Yi and Chu Shen were discussing, Pu Ku and Spectre were also together. Spectre said with a solemn expression, Old Pu, do you feel it? Pu Ku drank his wine leisurely, his shifty eyes looking at the sisters Kai Yu and Kai Xing who were walking by not far away. Hearing Spectre's words, Pu Ku casually said without turning his head, What? Don't you think Li Taibai looks like someone? Like who? Pu Ku looked as if his mind was wandering. Think about it carefully. Who does he look like? Don't you feel it at all? I do. Pu Ku smiled. Straight and slender. It's rare that they're twins. They're practically carved from the same mold. I can't tell who is who. Spectre grabbed Pu Ku's head with one hand and forced him to turn his head. She said resentfully, What are you looking at? What's there to see? Look at me, I'm talking to you. Pu Ku said, I can't look away. Just say it, I'm listening. Spectre was furious. Why can't you look away? Did they force you to look? Pu Ku slowly turned his gaze over with a fascinated expression. No, I want to look. Spectre was confused. She didn't know what he was talking about. She sighed and said, Did you hear what I said? Pu Ku took another sip of wine. Are you trying to say that Brother Taibai looks like F.A. Wuzuan? Don't you think so? Spectre's expression was stern. They don't just look alike. They're practically the same person. If it were others, they wouldn't have felt it so clearly. However, they had formed a formation with F.A. Wuzuan to fight the dried skeleton general. The three of them had fought a difficult battle, and the experience was unforgettable. Now that they were in the formation, they could feel it especially clearly. But they're not the same person. Pu Ku frowned. How can you be so sure? Spectre sighed and said, I contacted F.A. Wuzuan with the sound talisman in front of Li Taibai, and then I received a reply. Pu Ku was surprised. They're really not the same person? I thought Brother Taibai was F.A. Wuzuan. He thought for a moment and said, If they're not, then they're not. It doesn't matter. There were so many constellations on the myriad phenomenon sea. It wasn't strange to say that two people were similar. I can't talk to you. Spectre left angrily. She couldn't tell anyone about Fa Wuzuan and the Mermaid Territory, so she could only sulk alone. Recently, many constellations had come to Peerless Island to join them. This was because Peerless Island's island master, Chu Shen, had spread the news that Peerless Island had just been established and wanted to recruit talented cultivators. This was undoubtedly very attractive to cultivators who came from various galaxies and didn't have a place to stay. Especially since Peerless Island was a spiritual island. Even if there was no monthly salary, cultivators were willing to join such a place. Chu Shen personally received the constellations that came to join them. He asked about their origins, and then had the lucky star who was guarding Zhongzheng Island check the records of Zhongzheng Book. If there were any suitable candidates, they would stay. However, if there were any flaws in their records, they would be rejected. Not only did constellations come to join them, but they also attracted a few Yu Yao. Chu Shen politely refused cultivator Yu Yao's invitation. Firstly, it would be difficult to guard against them if the Yu Yao had any ill intentions. Therefore, the best way was to not accept any of them. Secondly, there was a limit to the number of Yu Yao each faction could have on the myriad phenomenon C. If Peerless Island accepted a foreign Yu Yao, it would take up a slot. If one of their own became a Yu Yao in the future, they might have to find another way. Chu Shen knew that both Pu Ku and Spectre weren't far from becoming Yu Yao. Naturally, the Yu Yao slots on Peerless Island would be reserved for their own people. End of chapter. Chapter 1493. The Battle of Carp Island had caused many forces that had designs on Peerless Island to give up. The forces that could not wait to attack Peerless Island at this time were not considered strong. Carp Island was already one of the best, but even so, Carp Island had suffered heavy losses in the battle. How would the other forces dare to provoke them again? Especially recently, Peerless Island had recruited many reliable people, and their overall strength had increased by a lot. As long as Peerless Island could survive this initial period of development, the situation would become more and more stable in the future. When one or two Yu Yaos appeared on the island, they would be able to gain a firm foothold. Lu Ye's main body had been staying in the cave these days, using the power of the talent tree to deduce spirit runes. After consuming a lot of fuel, the new aura concealing spirit rune had been successfully deduced. What he was deducing now was the life origin technique. Strictly speaking, the life origin technique that had formed with Hupo was not a spirit rune, but a secret technique. However, after cultivating for so many years, Lu Ye's knowledge and experience had long been different from before. From the perspective of a spirit rune master, any method in this world could be seen as an extension of spirit runes. Therefore, even if the life origin technique was a secret technique, he could find a way to reverse it and transform it into a corresponding spirit rune. As long as he could deduce the corresponding spirit rune for the life origin technique, he would be able to find a way to remove it. This way, he would not have to worry about his safety implicating Hupe Ni in the future. However, this matter was much more difficult than simply deducing spirit runes. If the talent tree had not undergone 3 transformations, Lu Yi would not have been able to come up with this idea. However, the 3 transformations of the talent tree had given him this opportunity. While his main body was deducing spirit runes, his clone was moving around outside. The main reason was that Ghost was always suspicious. She would often run over and contact Fa Wuzuan with the sound talisman in front of him, as if she wanted to see through his disguise. In such a situation, Lu Yi could only leave his clone outside. On this day, Lu Yi suddenly felt the sound talisman vibrate. He picked it up and found that it was a message from Chao Xiang. Normally, the manager of the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce would not take the initiative to contact him. Now that he had contacted him, it was probably because there was some progress in a matter he had entrusted. It wasn't news about the Jade Conch Galaxy. Since the last time he got the wrong information from Chao Xiang, Li didn't ask him to continue investigating. Fellow Taoist Li, in 7 days, our Chamber of Commerce will hold an auction. At that time, there will be something you need. If you want to participate, please try to collect as many spirit jades as possible. Those things are quite expensive. Of course, Lu Yi knew that the item was expensive, But he didn't lack spirit jades now, so it shouldn't be a problem for him to get it. Phoenix Sky Blue Crystal. This was an extremely rare mineral that was mainly used to refine magic treasures. It was also one of the few treasures that could upgrade a spirit treasure to a magic treasure. The treasures that cultivators used against their enemies started from the lowest level of spirit tools, followed by magic tools, then spirit treasures, and above that were magic treasures. It was actually not difficult to upgrade a spirit artifact to a magic artifact and then to a spirit artifact. As long as there were suitable materials, a skilled weapon refiner could do it. Lu Ye's coiling mountain saber had been upgraded step by step in this way. When he first obtained the coiling mountain saber, it was only a spirit tool. However, upgrading a spirit treasure to a magic treasure was a huge chasm. This was because the nature of the two was completely different. One was for cultivators below Yu Yao, while the other was for cultivators above Yu Yao. This kind of upgrade not only required a skilled weapon refiner, but also a few extremely special materials. Even if the other materials were expensive, the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce could buy them. Only the rarest material was not available in stock. Phoenix Sky Blue Crystal was an item that could only be found by chance. Cultivators of other sects didn't have this problem at all. They could just upgrade their strength to Yu Yao and buy a few suitable magic treasures. This problem was unique to weapon refiners. Weapon refiners were extremely dependent on their weapons. For example, when Lu Yi had exchanged the coiling mountain saber for the Crimson Dragon saber, it would more or less affect his strength, even if the Crimson Dragon saber was about the same size and weight as the coiling mountain saber. Therefore, after weapon refiners advanced to Yu Yao, they faced an awkward problem. They could either give up on the weapon that had accompanied them for so long and exchange it for a magic treasure of similar quality, or they could think of a way to upgrade their weapon. Lu Yi wasn't willing to exchange. The coiling mountain saber had been with him for so many years and had experienced countless battles. It could be said that it was one of the things he relied on to reach his current level. It wasn't just a weapon, it was an extension of Lu Ye's body. With the coiling mountain saber in hand, he could display his full strength. If he exchanged it for another weapon, it would more or less affect his strength. Since he wasn't willing to exchange it, he could only upgrade it, even if he had to pay a huge price. However, there were so many weapon refiners in the world. Lu Yi wasn't the only one who had to face this problem. Other weapon refiners also had to face this problem when they advanced to Yu Yao. This made the Phoenix Sky's blue crystal priceless. It was only in a place like the 10,000 Elephant Sea, where cultivators from many galaxies gathered and goods came and went frequently. Elsewhere, finding a piece of Phoenix Sky's blue crystal was harder than ascending to the heavens. The 10,000 Elephant Chamber of Commerce had obtained a piece of Phoenix Sky's blue crystal from somewhere and wanted to auction it off. This was good news for Lu Yi. Although he wasn't in a hurry to advance to Yu Yao right now, he would eventually take that step one day. He had asked Chao Xiang to keep an eye on this item in preparation for his advancement to Yu Yao in the future. If he missed this opportunity, he might not be able to find a second piece in a short time. Checking the spirit jades he had, Lu Yi found that he had about 50 million spirit jades. Lu Yi estimated that this much spirit jades should be enough for him to use. According to the Starry Sky's categorization of the value and grade of treasures, these spirit jades could almost buy a 9-star magic weapon. It should be enough to buy a piece of Phoenix Sky's blue crystal. There should be a lot of people who desired the Phoenix Sky's blue crystal, but not everyone would be willing to spend a lot of money to buy it. This thing was worth at most 10 million spirit jades. Lu Yi was in a good mood. He waited quietly. A few days later, he walked out of the cave leisurely and set off for the island of Versatility. The Peerless Island was some distance away from the island of Versatility, so he had to get there in advance. Having said that, he had never participated in an auction before. On the contrary, he had held an auction at the Constellation Hall. However, that auction only involved the twin Qi-connected array disk. The auction items of the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce would definitely not be so simple. He could go and broaden his horizons and see what good items were on display at the auction. After leaving the Peerless Island, he took out the star boat he had bought for 300,000 spirit jades and rushed to the island of Versatility. The journey was quite peaceful. Under normal circumstances, when people came and went on the 10,000 Elephant Sea, there would be very few unnecessary conflicts unless they were enemies. It was unlikely that people would start fighting just because they didn't like each other on the way. They were all at least Constellation Realm cultivators, so they still had some self-control and composure. After all, no one knew who the other person was. It would be disastrous if they provoked someone they shouldn't. On the way, Lu Yi changed his appearance and clothes and put away the mountain pan saber. He didn't know what would happen at the auction, but there would definitely be a lot of people fighting for the Phoenix Sky's blue crystal. Therefore, it was better to keep a low profile to avoid being targeted. When he arrived at the island of versatility, he went to the familiar ferry as usual. He paid the fee of spirit jades and got a pass to enter the island. The first time he came here, Lu Yi had fantasized about when he would be able to occupy a spiritual island and make some new things to attract the interest of the cultivators of the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Then he would build a ferry and collect tolls to make a fortune. At that time, he only dared to think about it. But now, in just 2 years, he really had a spiritual island. Although the Peerless Island was under Chu Shen's control in name, the reason why it could be revived was because of the minor constellation Hull's seawater reversal. Therefore, the Peerless Island was basically his. In 2 years, the changes were so great. His cultivation had also advanced from the early stage to the late stage. The only pity was that he didn't have any family or friends to share his joy with in the vast 10,000 Elephant Sea. When he arrived at the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce, the hall was very lively. Lu Yi looked around and immediately walked to the side. On the way here, he had already asked Chao Xiang about it, so he knew what to do at this moment. There was a private room in this direction. Inside, the steward of the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce was entertaining the guests who were preparing to participate in the auction. The famous top forces didn't need to come here, as the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce would arrange seats for them in advance. However, individual guests like Lu Yi had to come here first to verify their identity. After all, the auction wasn't a place where just anyone could enter. If there were no restrictions, it would definitely be overcrowded like the 88th hall in the past. Only those who were qualified to participate in the auction would be given a pass to enter the auction site. When he arrived, he saw a voluptuous woman wearing revealing clothes sitting there. Seeing Lu Yi, the woman stood up and bowed. Her almond-shaped eyes flashed. "Honored guest, are you preparing to participate in the auction?" Lu Yi nodded expressionlessly. He then took out a storage ring that he had prepared in advance and handed it over. There was nothing inside, only 10 million spirit jades. The woman stretched out her hands and respectfully received it. After scanning it with her divine sense, her smile became even more charming. "Honored guest, you have a lot of capital. I hope you can buy what you like in the auction." She respectfully handed the storage ring back to Lu Yi along with a jade token with the words, "Ding Jiao," written on it. Lu Yi took it and put it away, then turned and left. There was still 1 day before the auction began. He planned to go to the scattered market to see if Inja had returned. Although they had left a musical note imprint, Inja would definitely send him a message if he returned. Since there was no message, there was a high chance that Inja didn't reply. After all, Inja had said that he would return to this world to transfer goods. It would take about half a year for a round trip. However, the scattered market was on the Myriad Elephant Island, not far away. Moreover, deducing spirit runes had consumed a lot of his talent tree's fuel reserves. Lu Yi could use this opportunity to buy treasures with the ignition attribute to replenish it. End of chapter. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.